Welcome to our July 8th meeting of the Barnstable County Commissioners. Commissioner Bergstrom and I are here present in person, and Commissioner Lyons will be joining us by remote, which means that all of our votes will be roll call votes.
Okay.
So without any further ado, let me just remind everybody that this meeting of the Board of Regional Commissioners is going to be conducted in accordance with applicable laws. Anyone wishing to participate may do so either in person or by accessing the meeting via Microsoft Teams, or you can view the meeting through our live broadcast on our Barnstable County YouTube channel, which can be found on our website at www.capecod.gov. And any person who is or would like to record this meeting here in this room, please let us know. Announce yourselves. And I want to, what else do we want to say here? Yeah, I think we've got everybody. We're ready to go. So this meeting has been called to order, and I'm going to ask folks to join us in a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'd like to ask everyone to join us in a brief moment of silence to reflect on the bravery and the sacrifices of all those who put their lives on the line in service to our country. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody here in person who would like to make a public comment or statement for the commissioners? Is there anybody online? Do we have anybody online seeking recognition? Hearing none. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is general business. Excuse me, that's right. We have guests here from the assembly. So I'm going to acknowledge and introduce Susan Warner and Deputy Speaker Carl Frenzel, the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Come on, join us up at the table, and feel free to share with us any insights, observations, anything, any news from the assembly. So it's good to see you both here. Welcome. And
Thanks.
Okay.
Yep. Good morning.
good morning.
Beautiful day today.
It is. It is.
Gorgeous.
I know that we've been doing a lot of different things at the assembly, both internally, taking a look at our own governance and stuff and trying to make adjustments internally to things that don't seem to really work anymore as well as they might have when they first were instituted. For example, the Committee on Governance was not really used the way in which we're using it now. We're using it much more actively, and that particular committee ended up having 7 people and 2 alternates, whereas all our other committees have 5 people and 2 alternates. And after several meetings together, we decided that we would like to have that a 5-meeting 2-person along with the others, and it always ends up working better in that number, because we want to, part of the reason we have been using the committee so much more is because we want to move things in a meaningful way and still do the homework we need to do to get there. And sometimes when the committee, bringing it in front of the assembly can be a point of not being able to get it done because it gets stalled by all the different things that people want to bring into it. So, and we have been using the committees since in recent years a lot more than before, and they've been very, very effective. And it really, I think, has engaged a lot of them a lot differently than perhaps they had been before. we also recently, you might have gotten the press release on it. We voted to support the Diane Ziglio on her effort to get transparency in the federal in the state government. And that's one of the things that we've always pushed for, and we really feel, since the voters have already asked for it, I kind of find it interesting that there has been no movement in that direction, and there's so much push against it. And a lot of people think, as you all know, a lot of people think that audits are bad things. That's not always true. I mean, sometimes it's just to introduce you to some new ways to do things better. And so anyway, would you like to offer something, Carl? Kind of where?
Sure. So we have some pending ordinances we haven't finished work on that may or may not get to you. And one of them, I think you might have already heard about, and perhaps the speaker has talked to you about it, one we've dealt with, potentially creating something similar to the Aqua Fund with respect to the ability of homeowners to borrow money in order to acquire generator equipment. This really comes from the last terrible storm we had, where a lot of people were left in the cold for quite a while. That has run into some trouble in terms of its legality, according to our council. So it's back for more study in committee, Telecommunications Committee. Another article or ordinance which is still pending is an ordinance on the ICE activity. I know that you have issued an executive order, which was piggybacking on the state executive order, the governor's order, and there's another ordinance here which many members of the assembly feel would be an improvement by making it official part, something ordinance that's a permanent and cannot be changed. And it is a little broader than some of the executive orders, but that's pending what happens on Beacon Hill before they end this month in their session on their own Protect Act and what that will cover. So that is still in committee, shall we say, and not pending before the assembly. And then there's a new ordinance that has been submitted that will be studied, and again, in committee, and that's an ordinance dealing with potential tax surcharge, home rule petition.
The Taylor Swift tax.
The Taylor Swift tax of Rhode Island, which I was surprised to read. But Taylor Swift, I'm sure, is not a problem for her, but it could be for many others in the state. That is just beginning its work in committee. And then the last thing I'll point out on committees is that we've been very active in the Finance Committee, dealing with some of the ordinances you've sent to us, which we've passed, and I think will be on your agenda today. Some of them are housekeeping, but some of them are a change in the way in which the commission is going to finance its acquisition of its new property, which we went. All of them were following in exactly what the Board of Commissioners had recommended. So I anticipate that signing it won't be a problem for you after you see them. We sent them back to you approved. And then I think we're trying to, and we're working very well with the administrator and your finance director and assistant administrator on getting ahead on looking forward on the projections for the operating budget for FY 28 to 31, which is projecting cumulative deficits close to, I think, over 10 million, but it's a projection. But we want to see if we have some things which we can pass by resolution, which might be a statement, at least from the assembly, of where we think how we can work our way through this. We know we have a combined squeeze here. We've got significant potential capital expenses, some of those deferred maintenance, and some of those we know as PFAS, for example, liabilities, and that has to be financed, and that squeezes the operating budget to some extent. And also just the continued increase in expense for personnel. And a major driver there is health insurance. We all know that everybody's dealing with this. We're not alone in this problem. Municipalities are dealing with this. So these are things coming at us from external sources that we have to manage with our excise tax, which is a major source of revenue. But we also have been prudent, right? Together, the commissioners in the assembly, we put aside almost $16 million in rainy day funds and capital funds. So we have something to work with there too. So anyway, that's what we've been active doing. And so far it's worked very well working with the administration on that.
Thank you. Well, let me just say, just the reaction on the financing, I'm thrilled to hear this kind of commentary, because this is exactly where we've been for quite a while. We've been very concerned about this.
Mhm.
And to see the leadership of the assembly sort of talking the same way we're talking, I think is incredibly important. We've put a lot of pressure on our finance director and our administrator to help us sort of come up with a game plan to walk us through this. My hope is that when we do our budget message, after Labor Day, it will be what will be reflected in it is significant movement in that direction. So we've got things that we've got to work out. We've got to deal with our facilities planning. We've got to get the rust or nuts on our PFAS cleanup so that we can fine tune those numbers. So we may have there may be some estimates of cost that we'll have to work from in terms of laying out a long-term plan. But I'm very pleased to hear your comments. I'm going to ask Commissioner Bergstrom to chime in.
Yeah, we're all on the same page looking down the road at the county's finances. We've been fortunate so far, and there's always a risk in predicting 2-3 years in advance because you never know what's going to happen.
Yep.
No one could have predicted the boom in the real estate sales the way it has happened. And of course, I have lived, and Mark has too, through a downturn in county finances back 15, 16 years ago, when we actually had to cut back in the fiscal year and some of the stuff that we did. So, and I have a record of those years where we actually fell short on revenues. As far as the activities of the assembly, when you ask the legislature to do something, it's usually in the form of a home rule petition. You pass an ordinance, it's basically the county doing something. So now I'm trying to figure, and I was Speaker of the Assembly for 8 years, and I don't know that I have a handle on this, but are we looking for an ordinance to create a home rule petition? Are we looking for the Assembly itself to send a home rule petition up to the legislature? I mean, that's the question. I mean, if he goes up there and does nothing, I don't want the commissioners to complain for blocking it. So are we on firm legal ground that the Assembly itself has the right to send a home petition to the legislature?
Yes,
Without the approval of the commissioners.
Before we actually did the last one, which was very, very even. I mean, it was very controversial, and there was about 50-50. And we made sure that we had it looked at by legal and made sure that whatever was not supposed to be in there wasn't. But it's the home rule petition that went up. So I would assume that if we decide to move the tax on people with second homes who don't live here full time. Not the tax, because we don't tax, but if we move the question to the assembly, to the legislature, that it would also be in that form.
Okay, it's just that, for years, the county spoke with one voice. It wasn't, going back a ways, it wasn't the assembly did something other than but that changed for various reasons a while back. So now we want to make sure the process is clear so that, for instance, you don't have to go through to get a home rule petition. You can send it on your own.
But I think it's important, to keep you informed about, what comes in. This last ordinance that came in would end up being a home rule petition. And I think it's labeled that on it.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Again, I don't know, since it just came in, we're going to give it to committee first, and we're going to probably break it up in 2 different committees because it's a big issue. And I want to have the finances look really carefully, and I having been on the finance committee myself, they do a great job, and I want to make sure that that's really looked at carefully and we usually work with Carol.
Who do you file these home rule petitions with?
It's the legislature. It's either Julian or Dylan. And then they tell us, if it's still in the waiting for a hearing mode, which is what the other particular petition is. And from what I gather, it's going to be waiting for a while.
Well, I mean, it's also, I think, maybe I'm wrong, because it's not necessary for the legislator that you submit the petition to actually
No.
agree with it.
No.
He's simply handing.
That's right.
Right, but we don't, our representatives have asked us to send it to them first, and then they will hand walk it over to who are, and I think it's usually the head of the, probably the head of the,
They have a process they go
Yeah,
through.
yeah,
It could be going technically through the clerk, but.
yeah, and the reason that they asked us not to do that was to make sure that that they didn't see anything that was, and or that there was stuff in there that if they chose, they would, consider in other, putting together with other people who have, other counties who have
Yeah,
put
they
stuff
say you
in.
don't want to see how laws and sausages are made. I mean, that's very true comment. So just another quick question. Have you looked at a summer schedule? I mean, you're going to meet on a regular schedule coming up?
Yeah, we meet on a regular schedule. So if we have a limited amount of things to address, we may sometimes, which is rare, but we may sometimes take a break on a week, just so that we don't have everybody coming in for, a 20-minute meeting and then going, especially for our, people that are further down the Cape. So we've still been doing hybrid meetings.
Mhm.
And in the summer, traditionally, Upper Cape is pretty much, it doesn't try to fight the traffic up or down, and that's fine because it is pretty busy on the weekends and or on the weekdays that we do it. So so that's good.
Yeah.
It works out okay.
I think, if there's something which had to get done and wouldn't only, if the meeting would otherwise be short, we could do a pure meeting by Zoom. We've done that before on any emergency ordinance. So if there's something that quickly has to be done, and we otherwise wouldn't meet that week because there just isn't enough business on the calendar, we could meet remotely and do the business.
Yeah,
But
and we're very-
there's also taking the time to do
Yeah.
committee meetings. If there's, if we don't have an assembly meeting, gives us a little more time to work in committee. And right now, as we mentioned, there's a fair amount of work to be done in the committees, frankly, before reporting to the assembly. One other thing I mentioned is that we are on this new Taylor Swift tax, if you want to call it that, we are submitting that to council as well, to have council look at that home rule petition and get back to us about the legal aspects of that. So just as the other home rule petition, I think this one, we're doing the same thing there.
Are you submitting it to county general council or your own?
Well,
special-
no, our assembly council.
Special council.
Yeah.
I got one more thing is that my little discussion with some of your members, it seems that you might have a turnover coming up in the
Yes.
next election. And I don't know when the papers are due, probably in sometime next month, but it would be in the county.
They're due now. They're due July 21st, by the way.
28.
It
21st.
would be in county's interest to make the word out so people, qualified people understand that.
I think that,
it's gonna be open.
there's a certain amount of that that's already being done.
Okay.
Some people are leaving for health. Some people are leaving because of their age. They've reached a certain milestone and feel that it's appropriate to step back and let other people in, so to speak. And some people we're not sure why. It is quite a big number at this point. It's either 6 or 7, and
Coming close to half.
yeah.
I didn't know that.
But there are people out trying to, actively recruit, if you will, for positions that we know for sure will be available. There's a couple who say, yeah, I'm gonna not run this year, but we never know because they do always run. So, I haven't, that's why I say 6 or 7. But and it is that the 3 people that replaced people who left before are also electing to leave. Chatham, let's see, is it Bourne?
Yeah,
Bourne and
Falmouth, what we know.
yeah.
The only reason I mention is because unfortunately,
what might happen is if nobody steps forward, somebody might jump up who would never get elected to anything, can say, hey, I'll get my name on the ballot and I'll get in.
Oh, Glenn might try.
It's important that we get, people who are really interested in the job and have.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, there are like 4 people who are actively kind of word of mouthing around trying to find new people. But we'll step that up once we have confirmation, once the paperwork is in and we know for sure who is actually not coming back next year.
Commissioner Lyons, would you like
No,
to?
Thank you. I was just gonna ask if they knew what towns those were, but if you're gonna wait until all the papers are in, I understand.
No, we, there are, let's see, Orleans is stepping off because he went into sort of pseudo retirement, and now all the locksmiths are off the Cape, and they have more business than his son can handle. So he's back 100% in the business, and he just can't do both at this point because they also handle the islands, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. So he's just way too busy, and he's done a good job of keeping up his end of the bargain. But he said, "I can't run again." So. Let's see, that's one.
We know Bourne.
Say it again.
Bourne is.
Yeah, Bourne, those are the 3 new ones. That's Sampson.
Yeah, Sampson is.
Yeah, Wayne Sampson is stepping down. We've heard that the Wellfleet person may step down, but she's the one I'm not sure she's definitely stepping down because she's been on the assembly for a very long time. So she's one I would definitely wait on. The others are people who have definitely told us. I'm told that Sally Teague is stepping down from Truro as well. And I haven't yet spoke to her myself, so I might try to convince her otherwise. But let's see, who else? How many is that? That's 4.
Well, Phil.
Chatham, have you talked?
Oh, right, Chatham. Michael King is stepping down,
Oh.
and
How about a new one from Mashpee?
yeah, the one from Mashpee. Oh, wait,
McKelvey.
who is it?
McKelvey, Greg.
Oh, right, McElvey.
Is he?
That's right. Yeah, he's stepping down.
He is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of it, and hopefully there aren't any more.
Very good. Any other business that we need to discuss? Commissioner Lyons, you good?
No, I'm all set. Let me take my hand down. I apologize.
All right. That's good. Commissioner Bergstrom?
No, I'm fine.
Very good. Listen, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Our
And
pleasure.
you're free to stick around while we
Yeah.
have some other business
Right.
to attend to.
Right.
You can stay here, actually.
Is it
No,
the
I think
next
it might
item?
be good. I'd like to keep free up the seats.
Okay.
So our next item of business is an overview of the county charter review process, creating an elected county charter commission. So we have with us today Lauren Goldberg, our county counsel. And can we bring Lauren up on the screen? Robin, Ian?
Has permissions to unmute.
Say it again.
She has permissions to unmute and show her video.
Hey, there she is. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
Morning.
It's great to see you. Just before Lauren begins, I'm just going to and ask people to allow, if you have any questions about her presentation, hold those questions till the end. We're going to be using the recording of this for educational purposes. So I'd like to get through the presentation and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay. And obviously Carl and Susan, you're more than happy to weigh in with questions as well. But we know you've heard most of this because I think Lauren gave a similar presentation to you at one of your meetings. Lauren, we're going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good morning, everybody. I am going to share my screen. I'm going to try. See how it goes. Okay. Let's see. Oops. That's not what I wanted. All right, let me go here. Hold on. I was in the wrong spot. And let's go here.
That's unusual.
Yeah, this isn't my best skill set. All right, so let's try to play from the beginning. Can
There we go.
you see what you need to see?
Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful.
we can. Looks good.
Okay, so
You're gonna have to tell
today
us where the lighthouse is, Lauren.
I'm gonna let you tell me.
Okay.
Today's charter, today I'm gonna talk about kind of an overview of the Charter Study Commission process and try to give you some context for that as well. And what I wanted to do was to start with kind of an overview of the Home Rule Amendment and what it did in Massachusetts, and also about charters and charter commissions kind of at the local municipal level, and draw some comparisons to the state, to the county process, and then briefly review the study commission process. So in 1966, the state adopted the Home Rule Amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution. And this was really important because it changed the relationship between cities and towns and counties and the state. Prior to that time, local governments of any kind couldn't make changes to their form of government unless they received permission from the state. And that was active permission in the form of approval, essentially, of a special act, or the general court could make kind of statutory forms of government available. And those were the only real choices. Following the Home Rule Amendment, cities and towns can elect a charter commission, as can Barnstable County, to adopt or make significant revisions to a charter, or there are kind of easier processes to make smaller scale amendments to an already existing charter. And this is special and important because essentially this is what allows each municipality, each existing or currently existing county and regional governments to kind of adapt and reflect the priorities and values of the residents and voters in those communities. And so that is why, you can't go from Brewster to Chatham and expect everything to be the same, and why Barnstable has villages and a council, while the other towns in Barnstable County have select boards and, open town meetings or representative meetings. The Home Rule Amendment is what makes that allowable. And sometimes there are similarities, bylaws can not contradict state law. So there are things from municipality to municipality and in the county form of government that are similar, but there's also variations, and those are unique to that municipality or county or regional government. Under state law, in order to adopt or amend a municipal charter, then there are basically two branches to follow. One is the special act process, and that's a petition filed or approved by the legislative body. And if it's a mayor in that municipality, then with the mayor's approval, and it applies only to that municipality. And a special act can make major amendments to the form of government, and that would include the form of the legislative body and the executive branch, and the manager, and the county, it would be a county administrator or executive. So that's one option. And then there's another option, which is a statutory option. And Chapter 43B of the general laws implements the Home Rule Amendment for municipalities. And essentially what it says is there can be an elected charter commission, which can make major amendments to the form of government, and only an elected charter commission using the statutory method, or minor amendments can be made using the statutory method, which is a 2/3 vote of the legislative branch and then approval by the voters. The statutory method then is a way to make these changes without going to the general court. And there are a variety of different types of matters that are deemed consistent with the general laws that can be done using the elected charter commission. Why then do towns use an elected charter commission versus an appointed charter committee? And as you know, the county also has similar options available to it. And, the reasons for cities and towns is often that there are content limitations. The major amendments can be achieved by an elected charter commission, and under state law relative to municipalities, an elected charter commission can only be initiated by the voters by petition. The executive, meaning the select board or the city council or town council, cannot place a question on the ballot asking whether an elected charter commission should be pursued. So those content limitations mean that sometimes, board of selectmen or select board or a city council or mayor want to see a charter review or a significant charter review, but there isn't a groundswell of support for that. And so the only way to do it is through an appointment process. Why do elected charter commissions, or why are they attractive? And one of the reasons is that elected charter commissions typically reflect a broader range of viewpoints because the members are chosen directly by the voters. When there's an appointed committee, those appointments are often made to be similar to or to parallel the elected charter commission process, maybe 5 to 9 members, with each member, let's just say a 5-member select board, and then maybe 2 appointments made by a moderator, and maybe 2 from amongst the voters who apply. So that is kind of a typical path, but bottom line is elected charter commissions, when they're created, the members are elected directly by the voters, and so reflect the voters' viewpoints. Voter approval is required when an elected charter commission makes a recommendation or proposes adoption or amendment of a charter. When an appointed charter committee is used, the special act approach can be used for those amendments, or has to be used. And then those amendments do not require approval by the voters, although oftentimes there is a provision in the special act that will submit the proposed amendment to the voters, but it's not required. And then the final reason that elected charter commissions are sometimes sought is because there is a specified process that has to be followed. 2 public hearings, a preliminary and final report must be prepared. The final report is mailed to all the voters, and the time frame is dictated by an election cycle. So it doesn't go on forever. It has to be resolved in a certain amount of time. In Barnstable County, the charter, the Home Rule Charter, does provide similarly for major and minor amendments. And it requires a special act process for major amendments. It also provides, however, that the charter can be replaced, revised, or amended in accordance with the procedures made available under Chapter 801 of the Acts of 1985. Chapter 801 of the Acts of 1985, specifically sections 3 and 14, identify 3 ways to initiate charter amendment, adoption, or revision. The first is through a resolution of the Barnstable County Commissioners. And that is, in fact, what has happened here. That resolution is filed with the Secretary of State, and it proposes the election of a charter, or the creation of an elected charter commission. An elected charter commission has the duties that you see here. It is to study the form of government, compare it with other forms, and determine whether the government of the county could be strengthened, made more clearly responsive, or accountable to the people, or whether its operation could be more economical or efficient under a changed form of government. And, this plain text essentially sets a stage for a global review of the charter and of county government. The ballot question of, whether to elect a charter commission or whether to create an elected charter study commission will appear on the ballot in November, the November 3rd election. And that question is a yes or no question. Do the voters want to create an elected charter study commission? If the answer to that is yes, and the majority vote throughout the county is yes, then a charter study commission will be elected. The commissioners for the Charter Study Commission are elected at that same November election. And there will be 15 charter commissioners elected on that ballot, one member by and from the registered voters of each town. It is important to note that regardless of whether an individual voter is in favor or opposed to the election of a charter commission, every single voter gets to vote for a candidate for election. So it's not required that voters, vote yes or no on the question in order for them to vote for a candidate. Regardless of how they vote on the question, they can still vote for a candidate. To summarize Chapter 801 in the Charter Study Commission, we just said 15 members are elected, one from each town. The nomination papers are available from the local town clerks in each town, and they have to be filed with the town clerk by July 28th. The process, the local process is for the signatures of 20 registered voters to be certified. And the town clerk in each town is the only person that does the certification, or the only office that does the certification. Only the names of registered voters from that particular city or town can be certified. So if you had a nomination paper that had some, residents from Truro and some from Provincetown and some from Eastham submitted to the Eastham town clerk, only the signatures of the Eastham registered voters could be certified, just to bear in mind. So there's a signature requirement for 20 registered voters. And just to note that the state typically recommends at least 2 times the number of signatures be collected and submitted for certification because of the standards applicable to certification. Finally, those papers will then be returned to the candidate at their request. And then the candidate will have to file those with the Secretary of the Commonwealth no later than August 26th. So just a reminder, if anyone's considering running, that they have to both submit to the local town clerk and then to the state. And they have to actually be filed with the Secretary no later than August 25th. They can't be on their way. They have to be in the office by 5 p.m. The Charter Study Commission has also several ex officio members, and that is each of the Barnstable County Commissioners or their designees, and the Speaker of the Assembly of Delegates or their designee. So there will be a total of the 15 elected and the 4 ex officio members. There are also other participants who are essentially, ex officio, but without the right to vote. So members of the Assembly of Delegates have the right to participate in the deliberations of the commission, but not the right to vote. And they can endorse or dissent from any report of the commission in their official advisory role. It does not prohibit members of the Assembly from running for or being elected to the Charter Commission, but it wouldn't give them, and I think this is obvious, but it wouldn't give them 2 votes. They would have 1 vote and they would already be able to weigh in. The other person that gets to participate is the county administrator, non-voting advisor, who's essentially providing support and information to the commission as the administrator deems, important to the form of government, and will attend meetings of the commission as requested. In terms of the commission's votes and operations, the 15 members, each cast votes weighted by population, and then the 4 non-elected members or their designees cast a vote representing the average of the weighted votes of the elected members. The county provides space and the town for hearings, and then there's a financial amount reserved for the commission if a commission is created, and that's 35,000. And the chapter 801 says with or without appropriation. And then the commission can hire staff as it account permits. In terms of function, the commission is required to hold public hearings, sponsor public forums, and provide for, and this is language right from chapter 801, for widespread dissemination of information. It will report its findings and recommendations on or before the 18th calendar month following its election in a quote unquote final report filed with the county clerk and delivered to all elected county municipal officials, the legislative delegation, and the secretary. It has to be printed and made available at no cost to the public at large, at a number of copies equal to at least 1% of the registered voters as of 40 days from the most recent primary or general election. The Charter Commission has to publish the full text of its proposed amendment or charter and a summary along with analysis of its recommendations. And then the charter revisions are later presented to the voters at an election. I mentioned earlier that a charter study commission has, authority and a directive to review the charter in a global manner, but I do want to also remind the body that the commission would also review matters that would typically be considered during a periodic charter review. And they're listed there, but, clarifying language, making sure things are internally consistent, addressing grammar, looking at state law and, determining whether any updates or revisions need to be made based on changes in state law, kind of looking at streamlining government functions and reviewing, and I know I've talked about this at several meetings, but kind of reviewing the difference between what the words of the charter say and how things are being implemented, and vice versa as well. What's kind of happening on the ground versus what does it say in the charter, and trying to consider whether those two things should be made more consistent. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that or that may be directed to me.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with Commissioner Bergstrom and then to Commissioner.
Yeah, you answered one of my questions, just a weighted vote, just like it is in the Assembly. So the Truro will only have less than 1%, and Barnstable will have 20% in the original vote, and the official members will have an average.
Yes, thank you. It is a weighted vote, and that's right in chapter 801. And I'm just trying to see if I can give you the reference. So if anybody wants to look it up, they can. Just give me 1 second. I'll grab that for you. Okay. Let's see. It's too small for my eyes. So one moment while I increase the size. So, yeah, it says the 15 elected members shall each cast votes weighted by the populations of their respective towns determined from the most recent federal or state census. The 4 non-elected members shall each cast a vote, which is the average of the weighted votes of the elected members.
Now, the other question, and this has come up before, is that suppose that major changes are made in the election, I guess would be 2028, recommended major changes in the makeup of the commissioners of the Assembly. but it's not certain that voters will go along with that. So you could have people on the ballot. Let's say it was recommended that they have 5 commissioners instead of 3. You'll have commissioners, you'll have people running for the existing system, but you'll also have a new system being introduced. In other words, how can you have candidates running for offices that don't know it's going to exist, but they don't know the term of office or any of the requirements? I mean, it seems a little complicated.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a good point. I believe that the charter change would appear on the ballot in 2028 if that's what was recommended and there is a change, whether to the assembly or to the size of the county commission or anything else, and that those changes would be going forward and not at the same election. It's not something I've spent a significant amount of time looking at, Commissioner, but in my experience at the municipal level, those changes would not, be on the ballot at the same time as the question of whether to make them. So I think, if I had to predict, I would predict that the changes would not occur at the same election. And when the commission, if a commission is elected and it's working on a proposed revision to the charter, if it was of that kind of nature, my suggestion, if I, were to be asked, would be that should be addressed in the transition sections of the proposed new charter or the proposed revised charter, so that it was very clear. For municipalities, it will often say, that the question of, or that the additional offices of XYZ shall appear on the ballot at the next regular election. And it'll even say how they should appear, either whether they should appear, in the same office, i.e. vote for 3, or whether it should be 1 vote for 1, 1 vote for 2, 1 vote for 3 years. So that's something that can be addressed specifically in any new proposed revision.
So we might be looking at 2030 before any changes which pass the budget in 2028 wouldn't be actually implemented, and the offices would be changed until the ballot of 2030.
Yeah, that would be my expectation. Again, I haven't looked at it closely, but in my experience, the change has to be approved before the option of electing new people or changing the format or anything like that could be done. So changes that didn't require elections could be addressed in terms of when to implement. That could also be addressed right in the document. So if there was going to be a change in the budget process and it happened before a change in the number of commissioners or the assembly or whatever, the process to be followed in the interim could be addressed right in the proposed revision.
One more quick question. I know that at least my understanding is the weighted vote in the assembly and in other organizations. I chair the Regional Transit Authority. We also had a weighted vote for some things. It's sort of mandated in the Constitution of Massachusetts so that everybody has the same vote. And I think that, I would think that the Charter Commission would need legal counsel, not only on that issue, but any other issues they might address that might come into conflict with the Constitution of Massachusetts. So are they going to you recommend they have separate legal counsel? Is KP Law going to advise, or how does this work?
Well, that's also obviously a good question, Commissioner. In my experience, it is important to have legal counsel when a new charter is being drafted. There are certainly entities out there that provide charter revision services where it is not an attorney who does that. I'm biased in that I do think it's better to involve an attorney, not only because they're used to seeing, this type of writing and documentation, but also because they are aware of the issues similar to what you just discussed, the 1 person, 1 vote concept and lots of other, matters that are implicated by revision of a charter. That being said, I do that work frequently. I do it throughout the state, both for our regular clients and for special counsel clients. And there are other people in Massachusetts that do that as well. It's not just me.
Yeah, just to say, I wouldn't want to put you in a conflict because obviously KP Law is hired by the commissioners and we'll also be sitting on the Charter Commission, if we don't like what you're telling us, But I'm just saying, I want to make sure that the process goes through so that nobody can question the process and how it works. Thank you.
Yes, well, I would say, just to that point, you already know this about KP, but just for those that don't, we can't change our opinion because of who's asking the question. We review the law and we review the implications of the law. And unfortunately for us, sometimes we do have to give clients the advice that they wish they did not have to get. But this is, as an attorney, our duty is to provide decision makers with the information that they need, and then they decide whether, and what and how they want to do with that information. Again, we do this work both for clients and for non-clients, and I personally do not feel conflicted in providing, the correct advice. I provide the options and the information, and the determining body, whether that be the county commissioners in this case, or the Charter Study Commission, if one were elected, a board, a committee, the information is provided, and what to do with it, obviously, is the decision of the policymakers. And certainly we advise as to relative risk and to, the options, but ultimately, the information that we provide is going to be fair and accurate and appropriate.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, just to say, I never questioned that, but sometimes we have had attorneys that made decisions that the commissioners agreed with, and outside entities would say, well, you just did that because of the commissioners. So I'm trying to make it clear that we're not putting, that you are an independent entity and you are going to give us and the committee the advice that you believe is sound. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Lyons?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, Commissioner Lyons. Unmute. You're gonna have to unmute yourself, Sean.
Thank you. Good morning, Lauren. What happens if there aren't enough people that people decide they don't want to run, and there's towns that are, after the election, don't have anyone to represent them? Is that the end of the process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think that's the end of the process. There is language in Chapter 801 about vacancies, and I'm just trying to get to it just to make sure. And what that said, just give me 1 second. It says, this is in Section 7, if a member dies, resigns, or ceases to be a registered voter of the town from which the member was elected, such a vacancy shall be filled by the unsuccessful candidate who received the greatest number of votes in the election of that Charter Commission member. If the vacancy cannot be filled in this manner, the selectmen of the town shall fill the vacancy. And then it specifically says the commission may continue to act notwithstanding the existence of any vacancy.
Okay, great.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak over you, Commissioner Lyons. Yeah, I was just going to say, under state law, Chapter 50, Section 2, a failure to elect is also considered, which is a tie, or nobody would be considered a vacancy. And if I was asked, I would opine that would be the way to fill it. But I would just like to remind the county commissioners and that in an election, the person receiving the highest number of votes wins. So even if no one's name was printed on the ballot, if there were write-ins, the write-in, the candidate or the person with the highest number of write-ins would be elected. And so, that's important to consider when people are considering whether to pull papers, because as you know, that could be a planned write-in campaign where, people say, I didn't submit my papers, but I'm very much interested in running. They would notify the town clerk and the town in which they were going to run their write-in campaign, the town where they're registered. And the clerk would then know to instruct the poll workers to look for that name and record that as write-ins. However, this is a state election. The ballot is already going to be complicated. It's going to have many state election questions. It's going to have this question on whether to elect a charter commission. The thinking about what's best or easiest for the voters, submitting nomination papers if there's interest in running is likely the easiest way for people to pursue this, rather than waiting until later and saying, I'm going to run a write-in campaign. And if no write-in campaign is sought, then anybody whose name is written in has the potential of being elected. And, from the presentation I just made, there was a discussion about how, elected charter commissions, one of the benefits is that it represents the viewpoints of the community. And if a person wins because, 5 people wrote them in, that may not, in fact, be the best reflection of the community's viewpoint. So, just kind of bearing all those things in mind as people consider whether to pull papers and whether to submit them to the town clerks for certification.
Very good.
This is and so this is all due by the 28th, am I right? In looking at that, or is
Yes.
that just the papers? Okay. So it's gonna be very complicated, and it really is sort of up to county to make sure we get word out to try to educate people on this. It seemed like that was in the beginning of your presentation, the responsibility of informing the public and getting this out so people are aware.
Yeah, Commissioner Lyons, I think it is important knowing that the question is going to appear on the ballot, and knowing, as we just talked about, the complicated nature of this year's ballot. The more people that are aware and, people that pull and return papers, I think that is going to make it easier for the voters at large. And that there's real value. There's always real value in pulling papers and running and, submitting and having your name printed on the ballot as a candidate. As you all know, having your name printed on the ballot is important. But especially in the circumstances of this year's election, I think that will be helpful to voters generally, not just to the person who's running.
So I just want to make a comment and give my empathy and sympathy to the town clerks of all towns this year. Number one, I mean, I just know from my own town, it's a small town, one clerk. When there's tremendous amount of ballot questions on there, there's lots of candidates. And then there's things like this that are not out of the norm. That's a lot of work. So I'm putting in a plug for anyone who's listening up at the legislature to give more tools to our town clerks. Anyway, I can't think of another question. I think you covered it mostly with Ron, and I'm sure Mark will have questions that maybe I'm not thinking of right now, but I'll chime in while you're still here if I think of one. And thank you. I look forward to having that presentation because it's going to help us explain this process and what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lauren, we have with us Speaker Warner and Deputy Speaker Brightzel. I want to give them an opportunity if they have questions for council.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I do have one question. If nobody fills in a particular town or nobody's running for a particular town, what happens in that case? Do the selectmen from that town then place a candidate in there, or does it just remain empty and instead of 15 there are 14?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the way that the statute, that chapter 801 is written, it talks about filling vacancies. And in my opinion, if no one appears on the ballot and no one is written in, that would constitute a vacancy. And I would refer to section 7 of chapter 801, where it says, if there's a a candidate who received the greatest number of votes who wasn't elected, it would be filled by that person. But if not, the select board of that town shall fill the vacancy. So that would just be majority vote of those present and voting by that select board. But as I was just discussing with Commissioner Lyons, under state law, a person is elected who receives the highest number of votes. So if, you know, on the way into the polls, someone was to say, you know what, write me in to for charter, you know, the Charter Study Commission, and 5 people heard that comment and 5 people wrote in that person's name, that person would be elected. The likelihood of no one getting elected, in my opinion, based on my experience, is small. Somebody would be written in and somebody would get elected. And as we were just talking about, under the circumstances, you know, the ballot's going to be complicated. So, you know, having names printed on the ballot is likely going to be easier for voters rather than having to write people in. But again, I expect that someone would get written in, and whoever that someone is with the most number of write-in votes, even if that's, you know, 5, that person would be elected.
Thank you.
Carl?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have 2 questions. One is front end, one is back end. Okay. So the front end question is, it's an 18-month process. So let's assume the voters say, yes, we want to elect a charter commission. What is the mandate of the date it must start and the date it must end? That's the front end question, along with how does it even get organized? I mean, and who runs this? Who gets it started and launched and get off the ground? And then who's in charge once it's off the ground? Then my back end question is, on your slides, I saw that after there's an approved report, the whole thing goes to the voters of Barnstable County. So in that equation, I don't see the legislature. So just confirm for me that it goes to the voters and the legislature is not part of this process, or if I'm wrong, explain why I'm wrong about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take those separately. So the first part is that the commission, is required to organize, I think it's 15 days after the date that the election is certified by the Governor's Council, which is usually like 15 days after the date of the election. At that point, the person who received the highest number of votes organizes and posts the meeting. Let me just double check here. No later than 15 days after the certification. If that person doesn't act to post a meeting, then the Secretary of the Commonwealth can designate another member to convene the first meeting. At that meeting, the commission will organize by electing a chair, a vice chair, a treasurer, and a clerk, and they have to file notice with the secretary of that organization. I do want to point out that those positions and the discussion of who should fill them are subject to the open meeting law. So the 15-member board ultimately has to make that decision at the table. No more than a quorum can discuss that outside of a meeting, and there's several attorney general decisions on that. So just important to remember if that goes forward, and certainly I'll be happy to remind the commissioners if we get closer. But once that happens, then the whoever's the chair would be the one to schedule and run meetings with whatever assistance they needed from the administration. And they would continue to do their work. As I said, they're required to hold hearings and to, just gonna see, it says the county, okay. Sorry. Hold public hearings, sponsor public forums, and provide for wide dissemination of information and stimulation of public discussion. Essentially, at the municipal level, that's at least 2 public hearings. One before this initial report is prepared and one before a final report is prepared. Chapter 801 doesn't provide for that specifically. It just says hold public hearings. It says that the findings have to be reported to the citizens on or before the 18th calendar month, the next following. In a final report, and the final report and the analysis and recommendations have to be published twice on 2 successive weeks. Once that happens, then if the commission, now we're switching to question 2, Section 13 of Chapter 801 says, if the commission shall have recommended adoption of one of the forms of government they place a question on, which is unlikely, if they have proposed a special charter, it shall be the duty of the commission to petition the legislature forthwith for a special law or laws pursuant to the state constitution, and in the manner provided by general enabling legislation to carry out the recommendations of the Charter Commission. Upon enactment of the enabling legislation, the special charter shall be submitted to the voters of Barnstable County for adoption. It will go to the legislature for the legislature to pass a law allowing the county to adopt a special act. In terms of the timing of that, again, it's going to happen at a state or the election to whether to adopt the special act is likely to happen at a state election, and therefore, it would get pushed to the next occurring state election for which it could qualify. Certainly, the county's legislative delegation is going to be aware that that's happening. My kind of thoughts about how to minimize the amount of time it takes to get from one process to the next is to work collaboratively with the legislature and House Counsel and Senate Counsel as things go along with its final recommendations, so that there's some feedback already from the state level about whether and how what's being recommended is consistent with state law, making any changes that are needed, and then hopefully the legislative process could be expedited.
Yes, so Mr. Clark, it sounds to me then that after the report of the commission, working collaboratively, as you mentioned, with the legislature, we need a special act of the legislature to happen before it can go on the ballot for the voters to say yes. So the voters are saying yes after the legislature has acted. So that could delay our time past the election of November of 30, even, depending upon how fast the legislature acts. Right?
Mr. Chair, through you.
Yes.
Yes, so that agreed. It could take longer. I think if the goal is to get it on the ballot, at the next election, then the goal would be to work collaboratively with the legislature throughout the process, and usually House and Senate Counsel, obviously I can't speak for them and I can't speak for your legislative delegation, but in my experience, they are willing to work collaboratively and to address any legal issues that might impact the bill's ability to proceed, in an expeditious and efficient manner. And I would imagine that whoever works with the commission would be making that contact and trying to ensure that that there won't be a delay based on legal issues that would prevent the legislature from being able to act quickly.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I can say that in 1988, when we did this before, there was very close collaboration with the legislative delegation. They were very hands-on, very engaged. Having been around back then when this was previously done, I can attest to that. Commissioner Bergstrom, did you have another question?
Yeah, just, I'm running the math through my head and I'm not getting any results, because what you're saying is that there'll be 4 ex officio delegates and they will have a weighted vote each one, I assume, as the average weighted vote of the entire population of Cape Cod, which means that the committee will actually represent a population that's greater than the existing population, because you'll have 15 members who represent the population of Cape Cod, and then you'll have 4 members, which will add an additional 30% on top of that. So you understand? So then the question, I mean, it's a little complicated. The question is, how does the vote go, and who decides what? You know, I mean, I'm sure we can all figure it out, but it takes a little math to figure out who's going to have the say in the final makeup of the committee. The other question I have is, I've been through several charter reviews in towns, my town in Chatham, and normally everyone on the charter committee was independent of the actual organization. They didn't have any selectmen on there, and they usually didn't have any town employees, but there's no prohibition against, say, a department head or a town employee being elected.
Mr. Chair, through you.
Go ahead, please.
So under the conflict of interest law, that would really be what would prohibit someone from serving in 2 capacities. And typically, once you can hold an elected position and serve in an appointed position. There are sometimes conflict of interest law issues for current employees. There's various exemptions that could be available for that. And I do think, that the State Ethics Commission is available, certainly to call. And I always say, if you're forward looking, you can always call the State Ethics Commission and ask them for an opinion. Usually, if you're calling about something that's already happened, they'll change you over to the enforcement division because they're an enforcement agency, but forward-looking questions are typically okay. And then the other thing is that under Chapter 268A, Section 1, which is the definition section, when you're looking at the definition of I'm just trying to see, of a municipal official, you will find that members of a charter commission established under the Home Rule Amendment are not considered municipal employees, and I'm putting it in quotes, for purposes of the conflict of interest law, meaning that a person could serve as an employee of a town and serve on an elected charter commission. It doesn't specifically say that for counties, but that is something we certainly could examine before the election. In any event, however, it would not prevent a person who works for a municipality or for the county from running for the office. So there's time, as I said, to kind of sort that out. Also, I just want to note that just because nomination papers are submitted to the clerk for certification doesn't mean that it's automatic that they get forwarded to the Secretary of State for filing. That's a choice, and anybody, because the conflict belongs to the individual, any municipal or county employee who has concerns about that, can work between now and the August filing deadline to try and sort that out. And or even if they didn't sort it out in that time, they could still sort it out before they were sworn into office if they had concerns. So that's something to follow up on. But again, for the state, for the municipal employees, they can serve in an elected charter commission without any conflict. So that would be something, again, that if it's a county employee, we would want to to double check. But I don't imagine that it's going to be a conflict to serve on an elected charter commission.
Okay. Well, we're gonna end this subject right here at this point. Lauren, you've been incredibly helpful and informative. We appreciate all your time, all your insight. And I would also like to compliment you on your grasp of this. You've obviously worked on a lot of charters, and we appreciate you bringing this level of expertise to this whole topic. So thank you. And
well, thank you. And I wish you guys all the best. I know this is an exciting time, and we'll see where things are after the end of July and August when we know it's been filed, but happy to come back as needed and answer any further questions, Mr. Chair and members of the commission.
That's great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay.
Thank you, commissioners. Bye-bye.
Okay. We're going to move on to our next item on our agenda. And I'm going to ask the staff to bring up another chair to the table because I'm going to invite Andrew Flatt, Ronit Goldstein, and Andrew Falanchi from Eversource to come to the table. We're going to talk about emergency response, emergency management. We're going to talk about the July heat wave, and we're going to talk a little bit about Blizzard Hernando and some sort of look back on that situation. But I want to welcome Ronit and Andrew to our meeting. Thank you very much for coming to join us on such short notice. I think you folks have been incredibly busy in terms of interacting with the community, and I appreciate you carving out time to join us today. And Andrew, obviously, Andrew's our emergency management czar, and we appreciate everything that he's doing as well. I'm going to ask Michael Dutton, our county administrator, kind of help us lead this discussion. I do think that in the interest of time, we want to talk about the heat wave first, and then look at the look back on the other situation. But I just want to go on the record and thank Eversource for all of the incredible attention, energy, and effort that you have made here on Cape Cod in dealing with our emergencies, particularly the winter blizzard. We ran shelters. We were very busy. Andrew was in our operations center helping run things, and we could see firsthand a tremendous amount of work and effort by Eversource. And I just want to, on behalf of everybody here in Barnstable County, thank you for the tremendous effort. Cape Cod was very well taken care of by Eversource during the storm, and we appreciate it. So,
thank you. I'd like to, for a moment, Ronit Goldstein, Manager of Community Relations with Eversource. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room. As you know, I'm in my 9th year with the utility. Been on a lot of storm events and emergencies, including tornadoes on the Cape. And I'd like to thank the Board of Commissioners for having us here today. And I do want to give some credit to your county employees, many of whom are in the room, who may be online, whom we have a long-standing relationship with. It's a great partnership with the Multi-Agency Coordination Center, i.e. the MAC. And so we really, really appreciate that partnership throughout, especially Blizzard Hernando, which was, many folks at the utility are saying it's the worst storm that they've seen in decades on the Cape. And in the we had the entire South and the Cape, but specific to the Cape, there was a significant amount of damage and really significant amount of just really, really difficult conditions. Both ice and the amount of snow. So, and as well as the wind, not to mention the wind.
Yeah.
Or not to forget the wind.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your comments. I
Sure.
think one of the reasons why we want to talk about this recent heat wave that we've now come out of, thank God.
Yeah. Some wood.
Yes. We saw significant power outages around the Cape, and in some communities, the power would come on, go off, go on, go off. We wanted to give you an opportunity to help explain to us essentially what was happening, what's going on, and what the challenges are that might lie ahead. There's some people that are concerned that is this something that we're likely to continue to experience in a future when the heat wave comes back later on this summer. I think those are some of the questions that we've been getting as commissioners and here into the office. So we thought now would be a good time to give you a chance to talk to us a little bit about what happened.
Sure.
The heat wave, what's going on, and what kind of problems or issues do we need to work together on to see whether we can be of some help to you. I know sometimes with the utilities, we end up putting limitations. The communities themselves, I hear this a lot in the Lower Cape because when I was a municipal official in the Lower Cape, we hated it when cell towers would kept popping up. And so we were putting restrictions on cell tower operators, and then we complain about not having decent cell service. So sometimes we can shoot ourselves in the foot on some things, and I'm sure sometimes we find ways to make your lives complicated too. I'm interested in hearing any and all angles and perspectives on this. But I don't know if Michael or Andrew, you wanted to tee things up first. Do you want to say a few words and then let Andrew and Ronit?
Sure.
Then-
Just as in terms of introduction, I think we were originally intending today to be sort of a introduction for Andrew to the commissioners, and also sort of a little bit of a pre-introduction to the emergency management department that's on your agenda a little bit later. Obviously, the heat wave took a little bit of attention away from that, so we thought it would be good to have our Eversource folks in to have a discussion about, you know, what really happened, and if there's anything that we can do at the county level to encourage towns to adjust some policies that might make outages less common. So that was really it, and we'll get to Andrew, and he can talk a little bit about the after action for the blizzard, but you teed it up fairly well.
Let's go right to the heat wave, and I know you want to make.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I would like to introduce Andrew. There's too many Andrews in the room, right? Not too, just enough. So Andrew Falaci is new to Eversource. He's in his fourth week. Is it third or fourth week, Andrew?
Oh, wow.
So I'll take the lead on the discussion, but he's here for the opportunity to engage with all of you and hear and continue to be onboarded with the utility. So I'll sort of pivot. If I can just level set with respect to the heat wave, it's an emergency like any other. It's a little bit different. So Eversource as a utility has a dedicated emergency preparedness department that is planning year round for all types of emergencies. In fact, they were planning months and months in advance for the World Cup because of access issues, both in the city of Boston and in our gas territories for emergencies. So, you know, it's not just weather. They prepare for everything and look at the full scope of staging and housing, you know, lodging, and lay down areas for material, depending on the severity of the event. The heat wave, and so we do that as a matter of practice, and we stand up an incident command structure similar to your police and fire. We work very, very closely with all of the public safety officials on the Cape. We have a great relationship with all of the towns. Heat wave is a little bit different because we can see it coming. We're monitoring the weather as a matter of regular business 24/7. In fact, we have a meteorologist that serves the utility in all 3 states, and they look at the weather, and there's a couple of modeling systems that they look at in terms of not just weather, but based on the predictions, where they're going to be trouble areas, right? Trouble spots. They put this into a model, it spits out some numbers, and it gets adjusted based on, and it looks at system conditions. The same with the heat wave. The difference with the heat wave is that we're really focused on meeting demand, ensuring that the utility can keep up. Everybody's running their ACs. We also have to look, so we started calls on Wednesday, I would say, for this particular heat wave, Wednesday morning, early afternoon, and they go through all branches of the operating system, including supply, right? So supply is owned, if you want to call it. It's not really owned, but it's overseen by ISO New England, it's independent system operator. We didn't go into a level where supply, we came close, but they were monitoring. There's a level called OP4 where you start to get a little concerned that the entirety of New England would have to go into rolling blackouts because of lack of supply. We did not go into that. That was reported out at the beginning of every call. We also look at demand response. So people can subscribe to a program called Connected Solutions. It's through the Mass Save. Eversource and all of the administrators of energy efficiency help to run that program, and people are incentivized to reduce load. They do an outbound call. They called every single program available in this last heat wave because we could see it was going to be, you know, close to 100 degrees for 3 to 4 days straight. You get headroom from that. You know, you get, I want to say 1,000 megawatts, right? Just at one of the things that were called out. And this is reported out on every call. You go to transmission, how's the transmission system holding up, substations, and then the distribution systems, you know, how our transmission substation transformers operating. They look at anything that's operating at over 80% What can we do in the way of switching or offloading, they call it, right? Switching the from circuit to supply. So big picture, I will say that the system held up. It didn't hold up without issues, but it held up pretty well, all things considered. We rolled into an ERP level 5, starting at noon on Wednesday. What that means is we anticipate less than 14,000 customers across the state, which it was, and 1 to 2 days of restoration, so 24 to 36 hours at max, which most outages were. So it was an accurate, we would have elevated had it been more severe. But I think what you saw, especially to bring it from the big picture to hyper-local, what I heard from operations, and Andrew and I were fielding calls throughout the weekend, is that there were a lot of single outages, which makes it harder to, if you can pick up 300 or 200 or even 50 at once with a resource or 2 resources versus going to 100 different calls.
Right.
There were a lot of single. And there were a fair amount, and I don't have the number before me, but I know looking on Sunday, there were a couple dozen pull top transformers that were just, on the 4th day of almost 100 weather, they're starting to heat up.
Yeah.
So you did see some equipment failure, and they continued to see into, running into, with the rain yesterday. Our counterparts in Connecticut had a significant windstorm that pulled some resources at the end of the weekend. I don't know if folks are aware, but there was about 100,000 customers out in Connecticut. So we provide mutual aid. We requested folks stay back, and they did, to close out folks that had been out on the Cape, and they did that and closed everybody out, I would say, by sometime on Sunday, anyone that had any remaining outages.
Yeah.
So that's a big picture. Hopefully I covered everything. I don't know if there's anything I missed. Keep me honest here, Andrew. And I'd love to take questions.
The experience that I've heard is that in some communities, literally every hour, sometimes even frequency levels that were shorter, power would come on, it'd go off. Power then would come back on, 15, 20 minutes later, go off. And I'm assuming, is that a transformer?
So it depends.
What's causing that?
Yeah, I couldn't say specifically. It depends. So if we're talking about flickering lights,
Yes.
right? That's
Flickering, but also it's out and then literally within seconds it comes back.
so that's actually, the system is working as that it should. There's there's a lot of switching. We've done a tremendous amount of installation of automated switches on the Cape. So the flickering lights, folks don't usually know, but that means the system's working. It's an automated recloser or a switch that you can see them on the poles. They try to self-regulate, right? They open to shake the branch, the squirrel, the whatever might be, in reality on there. And by the 3rd time, if it's flat, it means this troubleshooter needs to go out there. They're our first responders and manually make the fix. But that flickering is actually the system working as it should. It's a nuisance, but it's the system working as it should. In terms of intermittent, it could be that we were doing some switching. Our goal is anything under 5 minutes is considered a momentary, we'll call it. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I've heard it said multiple times. So it's a very quick restoration under 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're saying it's sometimes less than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was, our dispatch was, people were working all throughout the weekend. Our engineers are still working to mitigate some of the issues that were caused and create and do the fixes days later. Into the end of this week.
I understand you interact regularly with ISO New England,
Yes.
making sure that from the supply side, there's ample supply. And then based on that, we may have these individual issues where it's equipment or some surge
Correct.
in demand, and the system itself is structured in a way to respond to that in some way. And like you said, in the instances the cases that I've presented, that's an indication that the system itself is trying to correct itself in some way.
Forgive me, to be clear,
Yeah.
the utility plans for the hottest day of the year. That's what for the peak demand.
Yeah.
That's what we build our infrastructure to plan to be able to withstand. Now, I don't have the numbers just yet, but I saw anecdotally that we came really close to the all-time peak on the 4th of July. I don't know if it's something that I skimmed over really quickly in an email. So I don't know if it's the all-time peak overall or the hottest the all-time peak for 4th of July ever on the Cape. But I know the South was very, very busy, and you all, you know, you live it. There were a lot of people here. So,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Commissioner Bergstrom, do you have
Yeah.
any questions? Then I'm gonna go to
Yeah,
Commissioner Lyon.
the question I have is, you know, there's a lot of talk about the effects on the Cape's infrastructure, the roads, and, you know, the water supply and stuff, and of course also the electricity. Do you have a analysis of the increase in demand, if you average the demand out? I know you're saying this is the demand, this is the peak demand today. Peak demand in 2030 will probably be X number or more, you know, and you built that because obviously there's bigger population, people are building houses that, you know, McMansion takes a lot more air conditioning than, you know, a small house. So do you have, does Eversource have an idea of what the demand is going to be so that you can meet emergencies like this, not just now, but maybe 5 years from now?
Yes, we do. So we have a system planning department, both on the transmission, the high voltage, and the distribution. They do a 10-year outlook that is redone every year. So every year it's recalculated because they have to take into account. So it's not just for the peak demand that we plan, but we also have to serve everybody every other day of the year, right? So if there's a big development coming, if there's a mall, if there's a large user, and even the small users, we have to calculate all that in. But the reason we do it every year is because that could change. A developer could decide not to build that development, or, you know, things change. We have an electric sector modernization plan that we filed with the state along with the other electric utilities in the state with that 10-year outlook. So there's new substations that'll be needed to meet demand.
And you're pretty much keeping up with that.
Yes, yes,
Commissioner
that's their
Lyons.
job. System planning.
Commissioner Lyons is out in Wellfleet, which is
Uh,
always
well,
a
I'm one of those
challenging
towns
environment.
But well, I can only speak personally, but all went well in the last heat wave, and I thank you for that.
Yes.
The use of generators. So those click on when someone's power goes off, correct? I mean, that's how they're triggered. It's not, someone can't use a generator manually. Like, there's a heat wave coming. I'm going to switch my house to my generator. That's not possible, correct?
So you can go on generator even if you have street power. It all depends on how it's set up in the home. We don't regulate how those are installed. We actually don't even know. I wish we did, but we don't know who has generation in their home and who doesn't. They're not required to report that out and how they've installed it in their home.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking, as things change here, and, you know, some of us would say not for the better with more development. However, I see a relationship there that could be helpful to everyone, but that's another conversation. But I'm just throwing that out there because it's some people could take the load off if that was deemed to be so. You know, it would take work and legislation and all that, I'm sure, but and then reporting who has generators and not. But I think that's information that would be good to have for everyone.
Yeah, there are ways. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if the example of a generator is the direction, but there are a lot of there's a lot of industry development, and if we can get the regulation in the state in the right direction, there's ways for, I'm going to call it, people to share in the ecosystem is my best description.
Right.
So we're involved in something called DERMS. It's Distributed Energy Resources Management System. So with new smart metering, that's also going to open up a lot of pathways that'll be installed in the next year or so. Everybody's going to get a new meter, and it's going to be a smart meter that reads. People will have much more insight into how much they're using, and they can reduce. They'll have more control, both from a bill perspective, right, to reduce their usage. And if they opt to go into this, say, connected solutions, then it gives us, sometimes it gives the utility the opportunity to turn down automatically it turns down the thermostat. They get incentivized. So there's, I guess my point is, there are ways to incentivize and work through sharing the ecosystem. I'll just call it that. That's my best description, and having enough for all.
Right. I think it makes it.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that, Commissioner Lyons?
Mm-hmm.
So what you're suggesting is the scenario that you envision developing over time is that let's say in my neighborhood, my community, there may be some businesses that have battery power, let's say battery storage, other residences that have storage. The system is evolving to the point where in an area, there may be opportunities for sharing that energy from other power sources. Is that what you?
Yes, yes. So if someone had a Tesla battery and they wanted to discharge it into
Into the grid.
once it's going to take some time and some additional, from a regulatory perspective, everything we do is, right, we have
Yeah.
to ask for permission for. So literally, so it is a vision,
No, that's encouraging because I think what it does, it also encourages solar development. I mean, I happen to be a supporter of solar energy development because it's so distributed, so decentralized, and it's easy to access, particularly if you have a battery that's connected to your system. I want to also just acknowledge we have the speaker and the deputy speaker of the assembly here. I know they have probably been getting questions from constituents on this topic, and I want to invite them if they have any questions. Carl or Susan, if you have any questions for our friends here at Eversource, don't be shy. All right. So, but no, I think this is a very interesting development. I would be interested at an appropriate time to have more conversations about this. Now, as you know, at the county level, one of the things that we did during this heat wave is we were engaged with our municipalities and other partners because we're concerned about making sure that we had cooling stations and places for people to go to get some to cool off and deal with this. And I wanted to give Andrew an opportunity just to update us a little bit on how that went and whether or not in doing that.
Can I just ask one question?
Carl, do you have a
Yeah,
question?
it's a global question, but in your opinion at Eversource, is it more generators owned by private homes better that help us in crises of cold or hot when the system is down, the overall system is down? Is it better to have that as a backup plan,
So
generally speaking?
I can't speak for the entire utility on that. I will say that it, it certainly helps to alleviate the stress when power is out to have that as a backup. But I think, again, our goal is to provide safe, reliable power at all times and to ensure that it's, at the most affordable price to the extent possible, I should say that. And I know that that's a hot topic as well, pun intended with the word hot, but, or maybe pun intended. So I don't know the answer to that. And I think we live in New England. We live in an area that can be very unpredictable. I mean, who would have thought that you'd have 4 tornadoes or 3 confirmed, 4th possible on the Cape? I mean, that was, to me, I don't know that anybody would have ever imagined that. So I think it certainly can't hurt. But I don't know that the utility really doesn't take a position on that.
Yeah.
I will say in terms of what the county can do to help, or the commissioners in general, is that we're in the business of building infrastructure, and it's not always, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and not everybody thinks our infrastructure is beautiful. So just to work with us to figure out how to build this infrastructure, because it's needed. It's not, I don't see electricity going down. Especially if people electrify, adopt heat pumps, which they have. Now there's a heat pump rate. So we just need to work together and figure out,
Well,
build it together.
We're very interested in working closely with you and being
Great.
helpful in addressing whatever needs or issues that you have long term. I'm particularly interested in your vision, and particularly this whole aspect of distributed energy and the ability to move energy from non-traditional sources of power, let's say. I think that's fascinating. I think it's potentially revolutionary. And I think getting a sense of your vision, your thinking on that, I think, at the appropriate time. And, I would encourage you to stay in touch with Andrew and Michael.
Sure.
And I think we definitely want to have an idea of what that vision is and how this is going to unfold. And again, county government can be helpful. But Andrew, I know you were about ready to say something, so. Commissioner Lyons, go ahead.
I just
Real quick.
wanted to say one thing before Renita's off the stage there, that I did listen to a lot of the, I chimed in on those emergency calls, and I just want to say that I thought her information and participation was really valuable, and I wanted to thank her for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Andrew,
All right, so as far as the heat wave that we saw, as far as county actions and emergency management, we saw this coming, pretty far out. So we had already been engaging with the towns for the 4th of July holiday, which of course is that added risk factor. We had a lot more people on Cape, a lot of events, people going to be outside. We had already deployed quite a number of pieces of equipment to the towns for that effort. We do a lot of planned event support. So lighting towers, our signboards all went out. Our mobile wireless camera trailer was out in the town. We also deployed our AM radio station to the town of Chatham. So 1620 was going, and they utilized that for communications. And that's something I'd like to see expanded as well. But those pieces were already in place. With the heat wave, we were able to work with the towns to open 7+ cooling centers. So the towns, and again, this is a situation where when we look at what is an emergency, when do we activate at the county, kind of at what level, I use the word capacity a lot. So an emergency or disaster is when we are exceeding the capacity of, so a local emergency is exceeding the capacity of the municipality, a regional emergency exceeding the capacity of the region. Now we're asking the state for help, so on and so forth. I think we look at this as something that is within the local's capacity to manage, but something that we want to be supporting and helping them with coordination. So we worked with our public information officer, Sonia Sheasley, to make sure that we're helping them push that information out as far as people finding out where those cooling centers are. Cooling centers, similar to warming centers in the winter, obviously for cooling. One of the advantages is it's usually in a building that's already open. They might expand the hours. They'll add some services like providing water and things like that. So most of them were in libraries and community centers, places that were going to be closed on the 3rd of July because that was the observed holiday, were kept open and made cooling centers and notified to the towns as well as on the 4th of July holiday. So those are a lot of the actions we saw. We also asked our partners at the Family Table Collaborative to support these. I know a few of the towns did take advantage of that and getting just some light snacks and water for folks who might come in, as well as our partners at the Cape Cod RTA, once again, activating their dispatch line. So if, towns could put out that number, people can dial that number and get picked up through their more direct pickup system and brought to those cooling centers. Working to get some numbers on what that ended up looking like and how many took advantage of that. Of course, they were had normal operations running as well because this wasn't a snowstorm where they were suspended. So that was really a lot of what we had put before the storm out. As far as how the weekend went, we didn't see, outside of the, some of the power flickering, we didn't see a lot of major incidents occur outside of, you can call traffic a major incident. There is a lot of traffic, but I think things went relatively smoothly across the towns. I know folks did take advantage of the cooling centers. I think it was a good effort another effort to kind of practice and how we help our towns kind of grow in their capability and these things that are a little bit between, day-to-day operations and emergencies and the more, hurricanes, winter storms. This is something where, how do we be proactive about these? So especially when we have a lot of risks coming together, drought, high heat, 4th of July weekend, wildfire risk, all those things converging. So I think from that perspective, it was a successful weekend. I just thank everyone who was, willing to read my thousands of emails that I sent out.
I did.
you didn't, Commissioner Lyons?
I did.
You did. Okay.
Yes, I even shared them.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Commissioner Bergstrom?
No, I mean, it's another example how Barnstable County is poised to respond to these kind of emergencies. I mean, they don't come all that often. Sometimes they come in bunches like they have lately, but for all the good things that we do proactively, there's also these reactive situations that we're prepared to deal with. So it's a kudos to your department and people involved.
Yeah, very much so. I think this can kind of conclude our discussion of the heat wave. Yeah. I don't think there's anything to add on that. Should we go to talk a little bit more about the blizzard itself and the next steps? Are we going to have Eversource participating in that discussion, or is it largely focused on us?
I think it's probably just if you guys want to, I think it's
You're
sufficient.
welcome to
You're welcome to stay.
You're welcome to stay. We just don't want to feel like you're on the hot seat. While we do an after action review and look at some of our lessons learned on the Blizzard, you're welcome to stay. But
I think the only thing I'll say is that Eversource has done after action immediately after the Blizzard as well. And we have all of our branches of the incident command structure are doing, we're in the business of doing the same work. So,
Yeah,
for storm.
I just want to say, I noticed that there were crews from as far away as Illinois, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So you guys didn't spare anybody.
Canada, they didn't even speak English.
No,
Really?
no,
You got your resources,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
resources were available, you applied to.
Yes.
I think it's a reflection on the leadership of Eversource when people here on Cape Cod go out their street and they see a huge line of utility trucks in the middle of a blizzard going down their streets with local officials plowing out areas to get in there to restore power to people's homes. I just thought in this blizzard, there were so many examples of this full court press. It was incredibly impressive. It really was. But it says something about the corporation. It says something about what it's all about, that you care about the customers here and that you're going to step up when there's big need. And I just want you to know, we heard that loud and clearly from people
Right.
all around the region.
Thank you.
You should be, and I hope you've been hearing a lot of that too, because I know we've had our days where people get the complaints. But during the blizzard, yeah, Eversource, I thought shined very well.
Great. I will, with your permission, relay that to our president of Electric, Doug
Yeah.
Foley.
No, the engagement was very noticeable and appreciated. Okay, Andrew. Okay.
All right, I'll swap with you guys if you like.
Yeah, and thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
I will use my, as all the staff know, my powers of brevity, speaking to not take up too much of your time, but.
You're almost unique in that.
Well. So, thank you, commissioners. So as you know, we've been working through, and Michael's brought up a few times, an after action review process from the storm. It is now July. After actions, and I've done many of these post-COVID. I did hundreds, too many of them. But these are processes. This is a formal process that you go through, and there are many different ways to do it. But the way we went about it was to get the best information we could on the county's internal operations and how we responded to the storm, the county staff, and kind of the things that were within our purview. So certainly there's more pieces and more things that occurred that are likely to be seen in other after actions, as Eversource, for example. And I know many of the towns have undergone after actions. Partner agencies like the Red Cross do their after actions. So having everyone do these, bring them together into findings. I'm going to be making the same presentation a little bit different next week to the REPC to kind of get some of that regional perspective as well and start to link those together. If I could move my slides forward. There you go. So just to bring everyone back a few months, if you want to go back to the cold months and the incident that we had, we saw over a foot, in some cases close to 2 feet of wet, heavy snow. 3 to 4 inches peak. The big piece of this was that this was Frank O'Laughlin, the REPC meteorologist, calls it Gorilla Glue snow. This was very wet, heavy, dense snow because it was near that rain snow line. So it stuck to everything. And then when you combine that with the 75-mile-an-hour wind gusts near hurricane force, in some cases over hurricane force, you're going to get a lot of not only power outages, but you see a lot of tree damage. And the trees coming down, it complicates things where you see over 150,000 customers without power. You have to first clear the roads so that the tree crews can get to the trees, who can then clear the trees so that then Eversource can come in or whoever can come in and restore power. So it's a process, and we actually saw with some of the snow, it got so dense that it was almost like concrete. And some towns actually had to bring in heavy equipment to move the snow. It was too much for their typical their trucks with plows on them. So we saw pretty significant power outages. Our first REPC call, regional call, was on the Saturday before the 21st. So we got folks, over 200 participants. There was a blizzard warning, and a state of emergency had already been declared by the state of Massachusetts. We activated our multi-agency coordination center the next day around 5 p.m., bringing in county staff and our partners to help manage the event. Importantly, Nauset Regional High School and Barnstable Intermediate School opened before the storm as shelters. That was a decision made by the town of Eastham emergency manager and the town of Barnstable emergency manager. They're the ones who make the ultimate decision to open the shelters in their towns. And we saw the storm begin. Peaked on Monday. We did have an incident where it turns out Nauset's heating system was not working on the generator. And so what we had to do pretty quickly was identify an alternative once we determined that wasn't going to be able to be restored. And so Dennis Yarmouth High School had been opened as a shelter by the town of Yarmouth post-storm. So once the storm had died down, they decided to open theirs. And we used the Cape Cod RTA to basically evacuate the folks from the Nauset shelter and transport them to Dennis Yarmouth. Through Tuesday and Wednesday, we continued to operate those shelters. Nauset had since closed. As I said, Cape Cod Tech and Harwich, we made the decision with the town of Harwich to open in order to help support the Outer Cape, especially with our primary shelter on the Outer Cape being closed, and make sure there was something a little bit closer that was open as well. And then we saw on Thursday and Friday, that was when we transitioned command up in the MAC. I turned things over to Vera, and Misty finally got some sleep from AmeriCorps, who was running our shelter operations. And we transitioned that, and then by Friday, the shelters began to demobilize and close, and the MAC closed as well soon thereafter. So that's just kind of a brief bringing people back to the incident that occurred. There's a bunch of numbers up here. I will say, we've seen these before, but really when we look at a response to a storm like this, there's the county, there's our department, and what we do, and then there's the Barnstable County Regional Emergency Planning Committee. That is a coalition of the towns appointed by you all, of course, who really bring together the fire, police, EMA, all of them to help with the response, to help coordinate regional action. That has existed for a long time. Many regional coordination calls. There's some findings related to that and how those go, because there's a lot of folks on those calls. But that's our Sean O'Brien, who kind of worked and started all this a long time ago, used to describe it as a big conference room table to bring everyone around and speak. So that's where kind of that piece went from. So how we conducted our after action review using kind of FEMA's process that they recommend. We went through and we did a bunch of focus groups. We met with county staff for an internal hot wash. We met with different groups from our municipal partners and partner agencies. We met with town health agents. We met with the town emergency management directors. We had a session with our community partners. We had a separate session with all of the AmeriCorps members, their alumni, and their ad board, who also assisted in responding to the storm. And then following all of those, we also sent out surveys to all of those groups as well to capture as much data as we could and bring that together. From all that information, we distilled that down into a series of findings. These findings are categorized in these ways. So we have best practices. These are things that where we had to do something in an ad hoc fashion that was outside of our normal procedure, but it's something that we think is worth continuing doing. Strengths are things that we plan to do and that did happen and worked well. Areas of improvement are things that areas that we think we can do better, and then mission critical. Those are really the key things that that we need to make immediate changes or take action on, ideally before the next event occurs. So we had over 29 findings across 7 focus areas. We broke them down into these focus areas: so sheltering, communications, MAC or EOC operations, mobilization, IT and infrastructure, admin and finance, and just kind of organizational culture. And I will say before going through all of them, really this response succeeded. And we got a lot from on the outside of people like this. Hey, we did really well. This is a good response. A lot of folks got a lot of accolades. And I think it was because of the people who responded, the different agencies, the leadership of different folks in the towns and at the county. In a lot of ways, they compensated for any structural gaps that might have existed or challenges that might have existed. So in looking through this, it's really figuring out where are those gaps that we can start to fill with policy and with structure and with frameworks, so that it doesn't matter if I'm here or someone else is here. It's something that we have continuity in as we go. So our first set of findings really came into sheltering, which was the major operation that we really undertook during the storm. There's a few different things. There is a full written report that after we present to the REPC, we're going to be able to then produce for you all. That's going to go into a lot more details in these things. But just as a basic overview for sheltering, we did find that there were certain shelter models that existed in some areas that worked better than others. We saw Dennis Yarmouth is a good example. They actually provide their own kitchen staff. They have their own system for utilizing the food that they already have in the shelter and the staff that they have there to provide feeding. And that really worked really well. We also saw Provincetown take the initiative to open and manage their own shelter through kind of a very locally controlled program with resources within the town. And that worked very well for them. And, you know, we certainly supported them, but I think that's something that we could carry forward. Challenges that we saw in sheltering specifically, facility readiness. I already mentioned Nauset. Now that was a particular issue with just how it was built, but you know, making sure that we have a formalized process of pre-storm inspections, going through each of these shelters. What has changed? You know, these are all schools that we use for our regional shelters. Sometimes the school district changes things move around. We saw at some of the shelters, it just took a little longer to mobilize because we had to clean out certain rooms in order to use them for other things. So making sure that we as the county can assist the towns on an annual basis of inspecting all of this, inspecting the equipment, utilizing our AmeriCorps to do that will be important. We also saw that we had a lot of volunteers come in and people come in from out of the state. The Red Cross and other volunteer agencies brought folks in. We didn't really have standard identification for them. You saw a lot of people in the shelters with some with Red Cross, some AmeriCorps, some, different agencies. Developing some more standards identification so people in the shelter can identify these as shelter workers, shelter employees, whatever it may be, I think was important. And really a big one was just roles being kind of unclear. I think it depended on, we've had this long process, we've had this long history of having the shelter program. I think over time it's evolved, different people have come and gone about who owns what in the sheltering program. Is it the town shelter? Is it the county? Some people will say, oh, the county does sheltering. Some people will say, oh, well, the town owns the shelter, or AmeriCorps runs the shelter. And it was different in some of the towns. And I think a big thing that we saw is we really need to update a lot of those agreements. And you'll see kind of the mission critical finding here is that we don't really have any more updated formalized agreements related to the shelters. The REPC has a shelter plan. We are party to the REPC. It's our, it's a county board essentially. But that's not a signed binding document. What we really need to see are MOAs or memorandums of understanding or contracts with the towns, with our partners, really defining what the county does versus what the town does or the agency does as far as command staff for the shelter, feeding staff, health inspection, rather than dealing with it in an ad hoc fashion. I'll say that a finding that'll be highlighted a little bit later is, I think, a symptom of over time, the lines between the REPC and our department and the county being a little bit blurred. I think as folks have changed, the original REPC, the chiefs that started that, it was a much more town driven. Those chiefs kind of ran everything and it was really a coalition of them, the towns coming together. And over time, I think what we've seen is a lot more of it has been put on the county to say, and probably through our own admission saying, we'll do that, we'll take this on, we'll run this piece. But we never really followed that up with any sort of written agreements that kind of holds us to it, but also holds the towns to their end of the bargain as far as what is supplied to these shelters. We see that the last time the regional shelter plan was updated was 2017 when I was last here. So it doesn't necessarily the framework that exists doesn't necessarily match, I think, the post-COVID landscape, especially that we've seen. I think the direction things are really going, and that I would recommend, would be really focusing on building up local capacity so that every town has an idea of how they're managing local sheltering, like we saw with heat, with the heat wave, and with cooling centers and warming centers. And then how do we as a region and as a county build a framework on top of that so that when their capacity is exceeded, we now activate regional resources to support that and develop and bring these into regional shelters, if that makes sense. So starting, all disasters start local, and then building a framework on top of that, rather than building a system that might look like, oh, well, the county or the region's just doing it for you, if that makes sense, the way I'm saying that. The kind of the third mission critical, and I think this is the one that most people are aware of, medical staffing was critically lacking. We did not have a large deployment from our Medical Reserve Corps. I think a lot of what we found, especially in the post-COVID landscape, a lot of volunteer agencies are struggling to not only recruit folks, but getting folks to deploy, especially in the winter. A lot of our volunteers are snowbirds. But, you know, I think there's also a lot of, well, I can come for an hour, or I can come for 4 hours, but then I need to go check on my dog, you know, or I need to go, you know, check on my house. And the reality is that once you go in for one of these storms, you're not going to be able to leave. You're not going to be able to travel. And I think that's a disconnect with some of our volunteer agencies and kind of how, you know, post-COVID volunteerism works. I think what we've seen since the storm is some of the towns actively looking within their communities for what healthcare capabilities exist. So, for example, Sandwich, you know, working with Spalding because they're there. You know, can we have an MOA for you to provide for our shelter some CNAs or some staff? Really, the need that we saw within the shelter was less so. You know, we do need nurses for certain medical situations and EMTs for emergencies, but really what it came down to was more the home health aid level of, you know, supporting people going to the bathroom, mobility assistance, things like that. And unfortunately, in the absence of those medical staff, it put a lot of our AmeriCorps members who we deploy to the shelters in a tough position where they ended up having to assist with a lot of those things, which they're not really trained to do. That's not really what they're there to do, but they are very, as I say, they're very empathetic people, and they're not going to let someone go without assisting them. So they stepped up to do that, but that should not be the way that things are done in the future. So that's a big topic of conversation. Yeah,
I saw that in my observations at the shelter, but I clearly agree with you. It's because the absence of that personnel.
Yeah,
people stepped up to take, and I applaud them for doing that, because otherwise things could have deteriorated with an individual. So I get all that, but your point's well taken. The need, we have a need to sort of find a way to strengthen that capacity at the facility. So thank you.
And I think that's, there's a lot of different ways to address that. I think all of this kind of goes back to the primary, which is, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What works for sheltering in Sandwich doesn't necessarily work in Provincetown, or they're going to have different resources available to their local community. And I think it's understanding what's there and building those public-private partnerships. I think is I know some of the kind of sub-regions of the county are already doing that, and that's something we certainly support and want to build a framework to support on top of that. The next few are a little bit shorter, thankfully, but communications was obviously another big pillar of what we do for emergency management. Sonia Shaisley, our PIO, and all of the staff that she pulled in to assist her, again, in a very ad hoc fashion. I think that's kind of the theme here. We pulled a lot of things together, and they worked, but we want to codify those. So our communications plan, the sit reps that Sonia was putting out and her team were putting out, the county website, pulling information regarding gas stations that were open, things like that, as people requested that information. That has been consistently pointed out as a strength, something that is a very good place for the county to sit in doing, helping the town public information officers and the communications folk amplify, speak with the same language. I say sing from the same sheet music in terms of what's being said, and how we making sure that that information is getting to our elected officials and to our Cape Cod delegation to make sure they're saying the same things and that we're all kind of on the same page. I think that was a strength. I think it's certainly something we can continue to improve and build out. I think that's definitely an area of growth for what we do. But I'll also say that I think one of the findings we definitely had was that the PIO, Sonia herself was doing a lot of the work for just like many of us for 96 hours. And I think another recommended theme here is going to be how do we better leverage all of the county staff and all of the county resources to support that. We have other communications folk that could potentially work as an assistant PIO under Sonia or be trained to do that in an emergency. And so being able to identify how do we build capacity for these different roles and functions without having to, hire a bunch of staff. Rather, how do we leverage what we already have and the people that, across all the departments that touch these things? We did see that we had, we had some degraded communications. We have a lot of redundancies here at the county complex. We have, Open Cape, we have Verizon backups, we have Starlinks, but, we don't necessarily have a good, we kind of do that in an ad hoc fashion. It's like, oh, this went out, okay, turn this on. Rather than having kind of a more written program around how we do that, building some of that more into, our infrastructure. We did have a little bit of trouble because we didn't move quickly enough, I think, in some areas for quick translation into other. We have a lot of different communities represented around the Cape. So how are we getting information to those people? We push things through our county website that doesn't necessarily hit people who aren't on the computer or people who don't have power or internet, right? So I talked about the AM radio station. Is that something we could expand so that we can really use it Cape-wide rather than in a region? Are we building relationships with these local community groups and trusted people within those communities, non-native English speaking communities and different communities to make sure that information is getting passed along to them in a way that's accessible. So that's something that we can work on. I also think we heard from our health agents, we didn't really integrate them well enough. They would typically work through our health agents coalition with our Department of Health and Environment. I think that was an oversight on our part where we were communicating with the emergency management folks, and that wasn't necessarily getting to them. So I think there was a lot of roles they could have played in the shelters above and beyond what they did. And again, how do we not only leverage our county staff, but all of the staff within the towns as well and what they do and make sure that we're coordinating. So that was a big piece. As far as our EOC operations, again, the REPC can and certainly is a regional anchor for preparedness. I think once again, we see that as a much older structure. A lot of those calls used to run in the days where it was literally a conference line, as we all remember. It's now on Teams. It's a large 300-person call in the way that we run it. Anyone can speak at any time. We've already had a lot of discussions around how we can structure that in a way that's a bit more efficient for folks so that we're not taking up a bunch of time from the emergency managers in the field, but we're also getting information out to people. Using different models to have maybe some sub meetings with certain groups beforehand so we can hash out certain issues, an elected officials meeting, and then use the big call with 300 people as more of a brief out of all of the information to try to streamline it. So that's something that we've definitely been looking at. And how we, the county, engage with the REPC. What is our role, the county, versus what is the REPC doing as far as, creating different functions? I think that's something, conversation that we're going to want to have going forward. Mm-hmm. We've already talked a lot about our external partners, Family Table, Cape Cod RTA, all of them did a tremendous amount of work. How we communicate with the state, so they use what's called Web EOC, Web Emergency Operations Center, where you input all of this information. They've really gone to this more, that sort of digital framework. I think it took us a while to really be getting information uploaded into that for them, especially with the power outages we experienced. And that led to a gap where even though we had a state liaison, he knew everything that was going on, but that wasn't necessarily reaching up at the state EOC, which meant, they didn't have a clear situational awareness of what was going on here in Barnstable County for the first few days. They didn't realize quite how bad it was. And I think we can be more consistent and we can get that information to them a little bit better, and making sure they understand so that they're operating from the same sheet music as well. I talked about utilizing county services. We have multiple departments that have a lot of programs and services that I think could have been deployed, county helplines, and different programs that we could have brought in a little bit earlier. I think as we identified in the MAC, it was important for us to bring in, we started to do something we hadn't done before, which is rather than relying on external folks coming in, understanding they're very busy out in the field, we brought in county employees from other departments and kind of tied them into their areas of specialty, and that worked really well. So I think how we go about doing that is going to be very important. And you'll see at the bottom, there's something called an incident support model, which is how do we build out an EOC or a MAC that is really run by county staff versus what it used to be, which was a bunch of police and fire coming in and running it from this REPC coalition, which doesn't really happen as much anymore, really because they are so busy in their own communities. They can't really spend the time coming to the county to do that. It's more and more been county staff running this. So we should build our framework to better support that. And then we also saw a need, and this is something, you know, I'll be talking a lot about in the next few years, which is going to be improving our equipment caching and infrastructure. We have a lot of, you know, as I mentioned, we put out a lot of equipment for the storm. We have those large generator trailers and different things, making sure that those things are in a state of readiness so that they can go right away. And we're not having issues with starting generators. They're not being stored outside where they have, you know, they start to get issues from being, you know, outside in an idle capacity for too long. That can start to create kind of a debt with them, a maintenance debt. That I think all of our stuff stored at the fire academy, we've identified that's kind of, you know, it's in the backwoods there, so it's not really that well accessible during a storm. So things like that definitely came up as well. Support functions, again, this is more about incorporating places where we can incorporate more of our county departments into what we're doing in emergency management. IT is a great example. They run IT for multiple towns. They don't typically have a seat in the EOC other than helping us with our own issues, but they're a great resource to coordinate with the towns to get us information about police departments that are down, and to help provide, you know, tech services related to emergency management around the Cape as well. Likewise with finance, Carol got the joy of coming in towards the end and trying to pour through our paperwork and get ready for FEMA reimbursement. That is a process that I think starting that from the beginning by embedding them earlier on and getting them involved from the outset would have made that a lot more smooth for folks. I already mentioned the leadership transition. I think that was handled cleanly, but I think that we could do a little bit better as far as how we determine when we activate. I talked about for the heat wave, how there's a difference in when is it an emergency that we need to activate. Traditionally, the MAC was activated through the REPC deciding to activate it, again, coalition of the towns. But since it's transitioned more to the county kind of running this, who decides? You know, I said we're opening the MAC at this time, and I talked to Michael about that, and we kind of having that again written down as a program and policy for really how we're going to do that in the post-COVID era, as I keep saying. And then as we identify these different staff and these different departments that we think could better support our mission, what training are we providing them? You know, all of our staff in emergency management are obviously trained in ICS and all of those things, but are we training? Are we, what sort of training and stuff should we be providing for other county staff that we may bring in an emergency situation? So I won't read these again, but that's kind of just an overview of those mission critical findings. Again, a lot of it has to do with the regional sheltering plan. I think there's a lot of different paths that need to go from here. As we look at the path forward, a lot of things went well. Our partnerships were strong. We have a good baseline. We need to both strategically plan for this department for emergency management for how the county engages in this for the next 2, 5, 10 years going forward. How do we build this function? We also have the added need to make sure that in that intervening time, we're still providing the service, right? So we both need to be planning for the long term, but we need to be ready for a tornado tomorrow. And that's kind of a big piece of a lot of this, and you'll see that in the full written report. So that's really all I had. I'm happy to kind of answer any questions and go into more detail. Again, this is just kind of an overview of what we found in the AAR. There's certainly more pieces, but I'm happy to answer any questions and talk for longer.
Commissioner Bergstrom.
Yeah, this seems to be an exercise in going into the past darkly, but I think we're in hurricane season.
We are,
Currently
yes.
in hurricane season, so it's possible. I mean, Hurricane Bob hit in August. I remember it very well. So this is important that we review what we've done and we're ready for the next event, which fortunately we'll get. I've got nothing but praise for our response from the people I talked to. And I get the impression, some of them, that they weren't aware of any of this. They wound up out of power, and their idea was to shelter. Well, they'll open up the gym and I'll go there and get in. But it's amazing that they found out what exactly was involved and the resources we put into place. So I think all in all, you're getting an A minus, maybe a second. An A minus. How's that? Room for improvement is always
absolutely.
But, I think we've done well, and the basics is, yes, decide who does what, who makes the call on when the shelters are open, and who organizes the resources, and that those resources are aware early on that they may be utilized, and so on. As far as the nursing staff goes, that's a tough one because it covers the whole Cape. I mean, lack of medical personnel, but by and large, you seem to have covered a lot of bases, and hopefully we're never going to have to utilize this again.
Yep. You never want to see me on a small screen talking. That's usually a bad sign.
Commissioner Lyons.
I just think this is a very thorough review and, an honest review of what needs to be improved and what really was lacking. And, I think it is something that the towns really do need to be sort of engaged in onto a certain level, because, there's a lot of good information in here and things that they could put in place, and then what's happening. So I know it's a lot of work to coordinate all of that and to get everybody's feedback and commitments, but Secure, you've done a good job in analyzing the situation and seeing what would make everything better. So thank you. I mean, it's really a very good report.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I would agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a terrific report. I know you got some help in putting it together and organizing it, and I appreciate all the folks that were helping out in organizing this effort and coming up with something quite thorough and comprehensive. I think this is exactly what we need to help you figure out what you're going to be doing 24/7.
Yeah.
for the next several. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of work, and I think it's a reflection of the board. I mean, we've been anxious to create a better structure for this, and I'm glad we're doing it now because, as Commissioner Bergstrom said, we're going to be in the emergency management business, I think, with a greater degree of frequency than we might have thought in the past. All right. Between what's happening with climate change and heating events and some of these other things that are going on, the winter storms and the weirdness of the weather patterns, I just think that this is something that's going to keep us busy on a far more sustained basis. And I think the approach that you're taking is terrific. I think you're on all the right things. With respect to the working with the towns, that's going to take some creativity. All right. And I think from my point of view, having worked, with administrators and as an administrator in municipal government off and on for several years, I think, the managers can be helpful, but I think, quite frankly, you're almost dealing with a constituency that sometimes managers don't even interact with a great deal of frequency. You're dealing with people that are hard to reach, and that's going to be the challenge, is working to get those people and get them engaged, and it's going to take time. It really is. What I'd like to see is, if in terms of interacting with the health agents, I'm wondering if the health agents can play more of a role. If we have our health department regularly meeting and interacting with all the health agents, maybe the conversation they need to be focused on is maybe they can take the nursing piece of this.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe we just get the health department and the health agents you guys have to, this is what we need from you when the call goes up, when the whistle's up, when the balloon's up, when we have to mobilize. Here's what we need you folks to deliver us with. And I think that becomes the conversation for them. Okay, I need for each town 2 nurses or 3 nurses or whatever it is. But every partner that we connect with has something that they have to bring to the table. And I'd like to see, yes, the agents may felt disconnected, and you know what? Unfortunately, that happened. But on the other hand, here's what we need you to do. It may very well be that they step up and rise to the challenge. And the thing is since we're pumping some additional dollars and collaborating and working with on the public health side, with some of the state funding that we're getting, I'm wondering to what degree any of those resources could be utilized or leveraged. All right, because we're getting money, big money on the public health side. I think if there's an area of public health need, it's clearly here. This is a priority. You know that, we all know that, and obviously this report documents that. So I think I'm going to be interested, and I'm happy. I mean, I'm happy to chime in or be helpful in any way beyond just sitting, behind this desk as a chairman of the board of commissioners.
Yeah, we all would, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can. We're helpful. We're ready to be as hands-on as you need us to be. But in terms of dealing with the nursing, because I've been wrestling with that question on the back of my mind after being in the DY high school, hanging out in that shelter and watching all of these people coming in needing a home health aide or some help. And I'm looking at these incredibly energetic, diehard AmeriCorps, can-do spirit AmeriCorps volunteers. And I'm thinking, okay, it's great that they're there. It's great that they've got that attitude. It's great that they've got that in their DNA, because that's what we're trying to facilitate, right?
Right.
We want AmeriCorps volunteers leaving Barnstable County with that can-do spirit, we can get stuff done, attitude, and they've got it. And they clearly, it's evident there. But we also need to know that we want that spirit and that energy directed in some areas. In other areas, we need to find ways to get more people to cover for that. So the health side, the nursing side, I think I'd like to see better collaborations on that end. Now, the other thing is I think it's nice that we have our own radio station, but when 1620 is, if I went to it right now, what am I going to hear? Anything? That it'll be dead. So it gets activated in the event of a storm. And is it largely something that Chatham people can tune into, or can I?
No, it is so we've licensed from the FCC the 1620 radio station. There's certain requirements on how and when we can use it for training purposes or for emergency broadcasts. We have 3 basic radio systems. They are basically a box with the radio system and then a large antenna. 2 of which are mobile units. One is in Chatham right now on top of the fire station that we set up for them for the event. One is in my truck out back, and one is actually mounted on a very large signboard that's also in Chatham right now. And those all operate on 1620. They can't overlap. The distance really depends on where the antenna is, so it's on top of the fire tower for that. But it can't, we wouldn't be able to reach the whole Cape with what we have now. But it is something that if we put it up on the jail, for example, how far throughout Barnstable would be able to hear it? It was really purchased to put...
I mean, the old jail.
The old jail, yeah. It was really purchased to put on the side of Route 6, particularly the signboard to say, tune into 1620 for bridge information or something like that.
Is there any value connecting with or having a partnership agreement with an FM radio station where during a storm we can just be on? They can give us time, public service time, like QRC or XTK, and or the community college. They have an FM station, and I think they may even have their own tower.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to do there. And that's an area we can certainly grow.
Yeah, I think finding a way to build a partnership with a network of FM radio stations on the Cape, because I'm not sure if there's one station that covers the entire region, but there may be, who knows? And I think that's something that I think is worth exploring, is being able to partner with a radio station or a network of radio stations where they'd be willing to pick up a feed live every half hour or every, at a period of time. Or maybe the press strategy is that we do communications wise a press call or a press conference. We did this during COVID, where we had press calls, but quite frankly, I don't want to talk long about the problems that I saw with those, but we may want to do our own version of a communication blast of some sort that we can get some help with. But I like what you've done. I think this is a terrific report. I appreciate you and your team sort of touching all the bases. Like I said, I think the commissioners want to be as hands-on as you need us. And obviously, we want to be as supportive as you need us. So back to my fellow commissioners, is there anything else that we need to talk about, Sheila?
Just the number. What's the number of people you think you saved?
On Cape Cod, during the storm, what's the population? Let's see, 200,000. I mean, realistically, as far as the sheltering goes, we saw a peak of around 250 at DY, I think about 150 at Barnstable. So, close to 1,000 people sheltered. And, obviously we provided services across.
I think, because it went as well as could go under the circumstances, I know there's improvement. I think people underestimate what a dangerous situation it was for a lot of people, especially the elderly population. To be without power and heat in the middle of the winter could have been a lot worse than it was.
Yeah, there are people that came and took advantage of shelters, but there's so many. The challenge you're going to have is keeping track of all the people that we've helped, because that's a low number. We help far more than that. I'm convinced of it. It's just I don't think we figured out a metric yet to calculate all that, and who knows if we ever will find a good metric. But you're focused on doing all the right stuff. Clearly, you have now a fairly long list of things to do. You're going to be very incredibly busy, and again, we want to be supportive and we want to be helpful. So you need to, through your chain, let us know when we have to be engaged again. And I'm all big on, and I think we're open, we've developed a very good relationship with our elected officials. If there's something unusual on the Capitol side that we need to pursue to improve our ability to respond and deliver in emergency, if we have to make a special request, knock on some other doors or whatever, I think we're all in on that. I keep wondering if we need to have our own physical structure where we can bring people, where we can do stuff. I've often wondered, do we need a place where we can do a larger clinic or a larger healthcare work? Or do we need a facility where the certainty of operations in any kind of event is there? Do we need to partner more with JBCC? I keep wondering that when the next hurricane comes, the amount of debris alone, how are we going to manage that? What's in the plan for that? Do we have a plan for that? Or is that on the list of the multitude of things that you're working on to figure out?
I'll tell you that you're hitting on right now is recovery. And that's, I think, an area where the recovery piece, we can prepare for a storm. We try to mitigate impact. We try to prevent loss of life to the greatest extent possible. But the real challenge is going to be how rapidly can the Cape recover? A hurricane, I will always be very blunt about this, will be devastating to the region. A major hurricane will have major impacts, right? Do we have the systems in place? Economic recovery, that's obviously going to be a major issue. Debris management is one that we actually are focusing on right now. We want to have an exercise for debris management. The state has a debris management plan, but I think for a lot of those things, what we see is the state has a big plan, but it's for the state. And we have some very unique needs and local needs that we need to try to address in that regard.
Yeah, and the thing is with Joint Base Cape Cod going through a master planning process, I think we need to be at the table. I mean, we're at the table with mass development and the military on regional composting. The towns are at the table on wastewater. We have our own clean water center there that is going to grow out at the base. But when it comes to disaster management and disaster response. They have needs, we have needs. We need to, I would like to see us have more collaboration with the military and how we can work together, because sometimes a partnership with the military will bring assets to the table that are military in nature.
Right.
Heavy equipment, for example. That military, they can activate engineering divisions. You know, there's just, when I would love to figure out a way to have the National Guard as an active partner with us in the MAC or somehow. And the more we have a presence at Joint Base Cape Cod, the more we have the opportunity to mobilize people there.
Certainly. And I would say for that piece, a big part of that's going to be the relationship with MEMA, because in a response phase, the National Guard is under the governor. They're under MEMA's, MEMA is the one who deploys them and can control those resources. For example, the ones that were deployed here during the storm. And so I think the stronger relationship we have with MEMA and actually having an agreement with how that works, how we almost operate as a sub-regional EOC for them, in the sense that it gives us greater access and quicker access to those things.
Yeah. So I think on the planning front, we need to do more. But, we've had meetings with Mass Maritime and their emergency management program and their leadership there. They're anxious to work with us to take on some of the load. And I would love to find a way to take advantage of the Mass Maritime talent, because right now you've got a massive workload sitting on your lap right now. And you need some more partners to help you carry it out. And I would definitely, encourage more interaction with Mass Maritime and their team, their emergency management program. Like I said, in fact, they may want to have interns and help us staff an operations center, right?
Absolutely.
In order to train their people that will be doing this stuff. So I see enormous opportunity there. So in any event, I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate your update for the commissioners. Again, we're hands-on. We want to be as helpful as you need us to be.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the another item. I'm going to ask that we pull something out of order, and we get into item C6D, and that is we discuss and get briefed on the Mass Service and Alliance grant, and we take that item up out of order, if that's okay, without objection. We know that there's some pressures on people's time today. And so we're going to take this item out of order. And this is obviously exciting news. And we're thrilled to get an update on new funding for AmeriCorps. Last time we were together, we were talking about no funding. Right? And now we seem to be, at the moment, having something to celebrate. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I just need to connect to the meeting really quick.
Okay.
Apologize, I was out of the room.
And, from my point of view, I know we talked about probably going over a number of things, but I think in everyone's interest of time, since I know you're under a lot of pressure, if we just go to the grant, talk about the grant, what the funding is for, what the requirements are, and that we let the commissioners vote on that without going into any other detail about all the things that we're doing, I think that would probably be helpful to you and be helpful to the rest of them.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
I'm also happy to come back and share the rest of the wonderful updates if you would like.
As you know, the AmeriCorps program is a hot program at the Assembly. It's a hot program clearly with us as commissioners. If you've got good news to share, I think we're all ears.
I'm just waiting to join. But I can, obviously start talking, and then once the slides are up, I can share them. But thank you for having me today. I'll just jump right into the great news, and that we were awarded a 3-year recompete grant that is for this year $499,999, so just short of the $500,000 mark. And we are locked in then for 3 years for that amount. It'll get renewed, and we'll get a new contract each year, but that is locked in for those 3 years. And we have not had one of these grants in, we've had 2 service years that we have been on a 1-year grant that is still national federal funding, but was directed from MSA, whereas this is directly from the AmeriCorps state and national program.
That's great. I'm gonna need you to state your name and.
Yes, sorry, I'm sorry, a little bit off here. Misty Niemeyer, I'm the program manager for AmeriCorps Cape Cod, and I think I'm ready to share my
Ready to
slides
go?
here.
Go live.
Yes. And I will just skip ahead. Sorry, get to where we're going.
It's a nice photo.
Thank you.
You look very good.
Yes, I will make sure we get to share these
Yeah.
with you
Let's get right to the.
later
to
on.
the meat
So
of this.
yeah, so I don't have many slides at this point, so I can keep it pretty short, but we received our funding or we received notification of our funding. And we, like I said, this will give us stability for the next 3 years, which is really wonderful. And it'll also allow us to focus on other things like supporting our members and other challenges that we know we're going to be facing over the next few years. And also allows us to more streamlinely move from service year to service year, whereas we were always waiting for funding that always delayed projects and delayed moving forward. So we already are having a really stellar recruitment year, twice the number of applications we had last year, which, as you guys know, we've been having a really remarkable year, and I'll touch base on that at another meeting. But we think the real key component of that is recruitment. So if recruitment is strong and we're able to select members that are, compassionate, service-minded, and dedicated and committed to this program, then that leads to the success. So we already have 189 applications for 20 positions. We've accepted 19 already. We're just finalizing the last one probably today. So we have a full core, and we're back up to the 20 we had reduced last year due to funding limitations at the state level. So we are back to our full force, and which I'm really excited about, because this year 18 people have done a remarkable amount of work. And so at 20, I'm really excited at what we can do next year. And we are also currently hiring for our 3 program supervisors, because we will have 3 leaving this year, which is pretty typical for this program. So we're hiring for those positions and hoping to have that wrapped up in the next few weeks. So now focusing on next year.
So we're working on agendas for our Harwich meeting later on this month, and also we have a meeting in Truro. Might want to consult with Michael. We should figure out when we're on the road, on a road show, maybe we can do a highlight and maybe focused on an individual town to sort of anchor the presentation. So what I'd like to do to move things along, Commissioner Bergstrom, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do. I have a motion. I move to authorize to accept and execute a grant agreement between Massachusetts Service Alliance, acting by and through AmeriCorps State and National, and Barnstable County, acting by and through AmeriCorps Cape Cod, and the cooperative extension in the amount of $499,999 for the first year of a 3-year award for the AmeriCorps Cape Cod service year for the period beginning on September 30th, 2026 through September 29th, 2027. With the 3-year award will continue through September 29th, 2029 for a full grant award totaling approximately $1.5 million.
And Commissioner Lyons, would you like to second that? She's saying yes.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion or any more things or comments, my fellow board members?
No, just congratulations and excellent news.
Right, okay. Roll call vote. All those in favor, Commissioner Lyons.
Lyons votes aye.
Bergstrom votes aye.
And Forrest votes aye. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
I just wanted to take the moment to just thank you all for your support. The last few years have been a little bit bumpy, and we just really appreciate your continued support of our program.
Well, we're happy to do
It was
that.
a long and difficult process, and we didn't know where it was going to go. So gladly it worked out the way it did. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, to be continued. Okay. The next item on our agenda, getting back on track, is an update on our finances. We have, I think that's where we are, correct? Fiscal year 2025 independent audit report by Carol and Renee Davis. Is Renee with? Oh, there's Renee. She's on the screen. Bingo. So
I'm here.
Carol,
Can you
coming
hear
up,
me?
or you're gonna let Renee do all the talking?
I can let Renee do all the talking. Thank you.
You heard that, Renee, right?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We
Yeah.
can. You're great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are we,
Thank
am
you for
I
your
ready to go?
patience.
Romina's actually with me as well, so good afternoon. I'm gonna say good afternoon at this point. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to come in. We are here to talk about the FY25 audit. So we just ended FY26. It's always a looking back at the financial progress that you made and the financial statements of the past. Can you see the presentation now?
Yep, we can.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, beautiful. So again, Renee Davis, I was a managing director on the engagement. With me today is Romina Mamelli. She was the director on the engagement. And what we're going to do is walk through the results. I think in your packets, you have the annual comprehensive financial report for the county. And we're going to go through some of the financial highlights in that and the results of our audit. So next slide, please.
I'm trying. Hold on. It's not moving.
While she
There we
does
go.
that, there we go. We're going to talk a little bit about what the audit does. We do a lot of communicating back and forth with the county about what an audit is and what an audit is not. We come in always again after the fact, once the books are closed, once Carol's done all of her hard work and got the county's numbers reconciled and has good ledgers, we come in to test those numbers. So the audit really is designed to verify that the financial statements are presented fairly. We do not look at every account. We do not look at every transaction. We look at your systems. We look at your internal controls, your financial policies, and how you're transacting, how you're recording revenues that are coming into the county, how you're recording expenditures and managing your budget, and really your processes and procedures to come up with your financial statements. Now, to do that, we also help as a non-audit service, we put together the ACFR. So not part of the audit, but an additional service. We do help to put together that pretty large report, but all of the information comes from your records and you actually review and approve. Carol reviews and approves all the information in that. We also audit your compliance with laws and regulations. We're going to talk about that today. That's your single audit or your audit of your federal grants. For the past several years, ARPA has been the name of the game there. We're finally getting to the end of ARPA, but you still got a little ways to go. And what the audit really is designed to do is to give you an independent opinion on your financial statement. So it's not just Carol telling you how well you're doing, but really we're not part of management. We're not there every day. We come in after the fact. We verify that the information that she's reporting to you is accurate. And that your financial statements are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles so that your financial statements can be compared to other financial statements of similar governments. And there's two reports that get issued as part of your audit. One, the first part of it is the financial statement audit. That is in your annual comprehensive financial report. So what we call an ACFR, used to be a CAFR, now it's an ACFR. But within the ACFR is your financial statements, your full financial statements, as well as our opinion on the financial statements. So really the part that we are responsible for is 3 pages of the report where we give an opinion. And the financial statements are put together in accordance with U.S. Generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. So we follow a set of rules, the GASB statements. We make sure that the county is up to date on all the latest GASB standards. Changes from one year to the other always happen due to new implementation of GASB standards. And the second report that gets issued is what we call the single audit or your federal award report. For 25, it would be triggered when you had federal expenditures over $750,000. You're clearly well over that. The threshold for that is going up to $1 million. Starting in FY26, you'll exceed that every year anyway. The standards that we follow are called uniform guidance, and that the federal government comes out with a compliance supplement every year to tell us what we have to test. So we have to go through a process to say, what are your major federal programs? How much did you spend? Are they big enough to be considered potential for major programs? And which ones are the riskiest and really need the attention of the auditors? And again, for the past several years, ARPA is the name of the game, right? So we have a couple more years of hopefully one more year of testing ARPA. But ARPA was so new and so big, and so many different compliance requirements associated with it that we had to structure our testing related to that. And we'll talk about that in a few slides. And part of that report, there's a full schedule of all of your expenditures of federal awards and any findings that would have resulted from that. So the audit opinion I mentioned, that's the result of the audit of your financial statements. The 3 pages with our letterhead, my signature on it, is an unmodified audit opinion. So the best result that you can have, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance noted in your CFA, and a consistent track record. You've had several years of having unmodified audit opinions and what we call clean audit opinions. And your federal awards, this is, again, we talked about your CFA. You had a total of $23 million in federal awards. Of that, 18.5 million was all related to ARPA, the ARPA grant. And so we have to do a deep dive. That's considered your one major program this year. So we have to do specific testing of all the transactions that happened within ARPA. So a deeper dive than you would do if it was just within your financial statements. We are testing transactions for allowability. So did you spend the money in accordance with the federal final rule that came out related to ARPA? Cash management and reporting, are you reporting it correctly to the federal government? You have to report your expenditures. You have reports that are due. I know you go through sort of the county process to do that, but we're testing to make sure they're accurate. They tie back to your ledgers. They're filed on time. No issues related to that. Checking for procurement to make sure you're following both federal and state procurement laws for eligibility of vendors. And period of performance, that's big right now, right? You had to obligate all of your ARPA funds by a certain date. That date's now passed. You're on a short timeline to make sure those funds go out the door and that they're expended. So period of performance is something that the federal government really wants us to look at. They give us instructions on that. And you are giving a lot of that money out, of course, to subrecipients within Barnstable County. So subrecipient monitoring is on the county to do. We have to test to make sure you have internal controls and processes to be able to do that. And what the audit covers, the audit covers everything in your financial statement. So not just your general fund, it's all of your funds, but really you have over $80 million in cash and investments under management. That does not include the OPEB trusts. That's $80 million in all other county funds. So of course, we're focused on that. To be able to audit that, we get confirmations on any significant amounts of investments or cash from an outside party to make sure they're there, that they exist, that you're reconciling them back to your records and you're reporting them accurately in your financial statements. The big news for fiscal year 25, of course, was you increased your stabilization funds. So, strong financial policies, but also strong reserves. You now have over $33 million in your stabilization funds, with a big transfer in from your general fund to bring that number up for fiscal year 25. The OPEB, we're going to talk a little bit more about the OPEB liability, but you have $5.2 million invested for OPEB. That helps to bring your liability down and make your whole financial picture look better in your financial statements because you're funding a known long-term liability. And of course, there's all the other funds. So you have over 100 other individual funds, grants, all of the smaller revolving funds and grants within your financial statement. So the audit covers everything. I mentioned earlier, we're not testing every transaction. Some of them are very, very small. They may not get picked at all. But we do a risk-based assessment on what could go wrong in your financial statements, and we design our audit procedures based on what could happen and what goes wrong. What could go wrong? And I'm going to go through some very, very brief. You have the financial statements. I'm going to go through some brief highlights of how you did this year, and I just want to make sure we explain the financial statements. It's a big report. But really, we always start with the general fund. That's your key operating fund. And we talk about your internal controls. We look at your financial policies that you have documented built-in controls. You know your budget process way better than I do. But your general fund budget for fiscal year 25, this is going to look like a big number. It was $38.3 million. That number includes the large transfer out to the new stabilization funds. So you budgeted in total to use 38.3 million. Of that, you budgeted to use, when I say use 15.6 million of reserves, of course, that's your fund balance in the general fund that you voted to transfer out to build up some of your reserves in your new revenue contingency stabilization fund. So within your budget, you used 13.9 million to transfer to that new reserve, $1 million just used for county operations, and then some to go towards the PFAS cleanup. We're seeing that in a lot of communities that there's money now that's being put aside for PFAS. Every community has a different situation and way of dealing with that. But overall, you had strong controls. Your revenues came in over budget by over $6 million. Your expenditures and encumbrances of your current budget were under by 2 million. So all of that adds back to your fund balance, your general fund net position. Your net position on a budgetary basis, and that's right in your budget to actual in your financial statements, you had a net decrease of 7.2. So again, you planned on using some of your savings account, if you will, some of your checking account to go into savings. You budgeted to use general fund to go into your stabilization or your savings accounts, but then you had strong performance, and that made your net position only go down by $7.2 million on a budgetary basis. And what happens when you go from the budgetary basis up to the financial statements is you merge together your general fund and your stabilization funds. So accounting standards require that you report them together. So when you're looking at, or any outside party is looking at the county's financial statements, your general fund balance looks large. You have $44.5 million in your general fund. Most of that, 33.5, is now in stabilization funds. You have about $11 million in your actual operating general fund on a budgetary basis. So just make sure it's really hard to go from one to the other just because there's so much money in the way you report it. And that's why your general fund balance looks so big, right? 192% of general fund expenditures. All of that is because you have taken a proactive step to put a lot of money away in your stabilization funds. You've reserved some money for encumbrances, not too much at the end of the year. And again, that unassigned fund balance is 44.4, 33.4 is all in stabilization money. And it's reported within your footnotes in your financial statements. There's a nice chart now that breaks out all of your stabilization money separately. This is the first year we've done that. But you know the numbers here. Your general stabilization is 1.3. Capital stabilization, you've had that for a while, 7.8. Emergency is 1.6. You've got 8.2 in PFAS. And the new one is the revenue stabilization, over $14 million. So that's sort of one of the bigger things that happened financially for the county this year. And other funds above and beyond the general fund, of course, you have some unique funds related to Barnstable County, Cape Cod Commission, with a $10 million balance. And of course, that had over $4 million this year in your special tax, and about $4 million in expenditures related to that. The septic loan program, you have $17 million. This is a lot of your borrowing relates to the community septic loan program. You have loans receivable outstanding, which right now are fully deferred on your financial statements. Great program to take advantage of. You know, most of your debt relates to that, and they're 0% loans. So it's a wonderful program that you're taking advantage of. We talked about ARPA. For ARPA, your balance right now is $3 million at the end of the year. The good thing about ARPA, one of the nice things, other than the federal government giving us money, is that you get to keep the interest and use that interest. So the balance in ARPA very typically is just the accumulated interest that you've gotten on those funds throughout the years. That's $3.2 million. Your unearned revenue is 4.9. What happens with federal grants is when you get the money, ARPA, they gave you the money up front. You got cash in the bank. You don't recognize it as revenue until you've actually given the money out. You've granted it to parties or you've used it. So once you spend or use that money, you recognize the revenue. So at the end of 25, that 4.9 million in unearned revenue on your balance sheet is all money that you have the cash in the bank, but you haven't used it yet. And smaller funds, the gifts and grants funds, of course, 356,000. And then everything else that's governmental, other than the enterprise fund, goes into a category called non-major governmental funds. That's all of your other revolving funds, special revenue funds, anything else of a capital nature. And you have, because you're doing a comprehensive report, there's schedules in the back of your ACFR that will give you a breakout if anybody's interested, balance sheet and income statement for all of those non-major governmental funds. And another unique one for Barnstable County is the Dredge Enterprise Fund. The Dredge Enterprise Fund is always shown on the full accrual basis of accounting. So it's easier to look at it from a cash basis really than a fund balance basis. When you look fund balance wise, you only have $435,000 of ending balance, but really it's because you're reporting the long-term liabilities, pension and OPEB related to dredge. So if you want to look at it, and manage it more on a cash flow basis. And you're fine that way. It looks like a little balance, but that little balance is really because of the long-term liabilities. And we'll talk a little bit about the big liabilities. So from an audit perspective, we spend a lot of focus on the big numbers in the financial statements and how we can audit those and make sure they're accurate. And of course, OPEB and pension are always the big numbers in the financial statements. OPEB, of course, is your requirement to pay for health insurance and benefits for retirees. So you have an obligation to measure the liability, to report the liability, and you have the opportunity to put money aside to fund the liability, which you've actually done a good job on. You, in fiscal 25, set aside $500,000 towards funding that liability. In a trust fund that you've established, you're now at $5 million, which is invested with a long-term outlook on those investments, helps to bring the whole liability down. The valuation that was used to measure your liability was as of June 30th, 24. You remeasure this every 2 years. So every 2 years, the actuary comes in and says, how did we do? We made some assumptions on how long people would live, what health insurance was going to cost, how many people in retirement were actually going to take advantage of our health insurance plan. And you really compare that to what really happened and remeasure the liability. So your unfunded liability reported as of June 30th ends up being $20 million. You are just over 20% funded now with OPEB, which is better than most. We have some odd communities that are fully funded or getting really close, but really if you're averaging yourself across the state, you're doing pretty well. There's a lot in the financial statements, note disclosures related to OPEB, and what you're building onto, what the accounting standards started to let you build onto is a 10-year trend schedule. So if you look in the back of the report, it will show you that we're up to 9 years, but 9 years ago you had zero funding for OPEB, and now you've put aside $5.2 million. So the standards in measuring it really have helped to bring those liabilities down because people are measuring, paying attention to the benefits that are offered, and really putting money aside to help fund that in the future. And the next one you have less control over is your share of Barnstable County Retirement Association. So Barnstable County, of course, is groups all of the communities in Barnstable County. You are a portion of that, and you are required to pay your what they come up with for your assessment into Barnstable County. Now, the county system is almost 70% funded. some good years, some required contributions. So our anticipation always is that the retirement systems will be fully funded far before OPEB because the law requires you to be on a funding schedule. They too have, they remeasure it every 2 years. They have a new valuation. The actuary comes in and to see how they did, how their investments did, and how their, how people measured up or all their assumptions measured up compared to what they expected. And other than getting the reports from Barnstable County Retirement, which we end up doing, one of our other departments, another group of people do that audit report. But other than getting that, we have to focus to make sure the information coming from Barnstable County going over to the retirement system is accurate. So your share of Barnstable County depends on you giving them good information. So our focus when we're auditing that number from your perspective is to make sure that the reports that you're transmitting to them, the census information that they get from you is accurate so that they are accurately reporting back to you your share of the liability and no issues related to that. And some of the other big numbers in your financial statements, yours not so bad, but I was just looking at your governmental debt. Overall, you have, your debt burden is pretty low compared to other governments. You've been very fortunate. I mentioned earlier that your long-term debt, even with the dredge and with your general government, most of it is in Mass Clean Water Trust interest-free loans. We like to think that's good debt, right? That's good. If someone's going to lend you money to operate a really good program and they're going to give it to you interest-free, it's a good program that the state runs that you should take advantage of. So really, your debt service is 1% of your budget, very, very low compared to other governments. So that's really strong when somebody's looking at your financial position. And we'll talk a little bit about how your policies that you have in place and how they relate to the audit and help you financially. This slide really has all of your key financial policies listed. I will say we pay attention to all of these for the audit, except for financial forecasting. That's the one area that I'm not concerned with because we always have sort of a looking back view. But we start the audit, we talked about budgeting, your budget process. Do you have a process to have a balanced budget? And do you have controls in place to make sure that you are keeping people in line with that budget, that you're watching it, that you have strong budgetary results? We talked about that and you do. Of course, accounting and financial reporting, having documented controls over that helps you to be able to prepare your financial statements that are accurate, that are timely, that don't require a lot of adjustments and so forth. Financial reserves, those are your stabilization funds. That was the key thing that happened this year for your audit. Capital, of course, capital, you're planning. I heard you earlier talking about capital planning and how you were going to fund capital going forward. As far as the financial statements go, you report your capital assets once a year. We check to make sure that you have strong controls over identifying not only the assets, but estimating your lives of the assets so that you have a strong plan in place, not only to build new assets, but to maintain and account for the assets that you have. Debt we just talked about. Investments, we want to make sure you're in compliance with the law, that the investments you have comply with the law. OPEB, of course, can be invested differently than other funds. And you do that, you take advantage of that, but making sure you've valued them properly. And they're in compliance with, we have strict laws in Massachusetts about what you can and cannot invest in. Grant management, that's ARPA. And then the smaller gifts and donations. So these come right off of your financial policies. Having them in writing helps. Romina, if you can just go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. So, good policies that are documented. That is what not only the Government Finance Officers Association recommends, Division of Local Services recommends. That is one of the first things that the rating agencies look for. Do you have strong policies that are documented and that will outlive, transitions in staff, transitions in elected officials and so forth? If you have them in writing, then they will live, through those. Right now, we are in a world that people have a lot of transition in financial positions. It's hard to find people. It's hard to find, good quality staff. And if you have any kind of downturn, having your documented policies really helps. They help to have strong internal controls that are not sort of ad hoc, but that you have them documented and you're following them. And really, it gives you discipline in your financial reporting. So your report, we talked about, you have an ACFR, not just financial statements. You did get an award of excellence in financial reporting from the GFOA. You've gotten that for several years. We're the first county. I don't think we have any other counties in Massachusetts that are submitting an ACFR that I'm aware of, but I know you were the first to do that. You did get the certificate. You've again put this into, your next ACFR. You always go forward and put the next ACFR in. So 24 got the award, 25 was put in for the award. And consistent clean opinions. If you didn't have clean audit opinions, you wouldn't be able to do that and submit for that special recognition. And I'll wrap up with this, some key takeaways from this: clean on both accounts. So again, clean audit opinions, all the work, all the testing, and audit's never fun. I think I heard somebody early at the beginning of the meeting saying that audits aren't always a bad thing. Audits aren't a bad thing. Audits are a good thing, but I will tell you they're not convenient. We come in and really disrupt the day-to-day operations, and we do a lot of testing, and it can be a little bit annoying for people to do, but we get a lot of support in Barnstable County. I think Carol and her team do a great job helping us. The result of that is clean audit opinions. Your policies really are driving consistency. Your internal controls are strong. And really the outcome is shown in the audit opinions and the GFOA award that you receive. And with that, I will take any questions you have on the audit.
Great, thank you. Excellent report. Commissioner Lyons, would you like to go first?
Well, we have an excellent director of finance, and she does a great job, and it shows. But a lot of people will look at this and say, "You're sitting on a lot of money there. Give me some." How do we say that this is actually a good thing and we're doing the right thing by being prudent and go ahead.
No. I will, right? So, that does come back to having strong policies. And yes, so there is a lot of money there. And, I hear you talking about, right, there's budgetary constraints, and we have, what are we going to be looking at for deficits going forward? How are we going to move forward? You can't live day to day in governments, right? Having policies to make sure that you are setting limits. You don't want to have, your stabilization funds at whatever you can have them. You want to set them at limits. Here's what's right for us. We know we have these things coming down the road. We know we have some potential PFAS liability. We know we're going to have some budget constraints going forward. You want to set your policies, and you do have a general fund policy to say, we're going to keep our general fund balance at approximately a certain percent. I think a certain percent of our operating budget. You want to have enough liquid money, just think about your personal finances, enough liquid money that if you have a couple of down months that you're still going to be able to pay the bills and operate. You want to, you have some good guaranteed revenue. So you have strong revenue sources, which is really good going forward. But there's always the constraints on the requirements of, we don't know, you've got a fund pension, you don't know what health insurance is. The costs of everything are going up, sometimes in some cases higher than the revenues are. But when you're looking to say, how much cash do we have? Don't look at it from a cash perspective, because that cash is not all available for you to go and spend. It's not all available for the budget process.
Thank you. That's what I needed to be said. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Bergstrom.
Yeah, obviously it's a good picture. You can look at it and say we've built up reserves, and we should be set, especially with revenue contingencies in case we do have a couple of down years. But I've always said the county's not a bank. We exist to supply services to people. So collecting money in the bank it's not really our purpose in life. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have some financial liabilities going forward with a lot of capital expenditures. We don't know what OPEB is, so I think it's important to take the reserves that we have and designate them for the future so that they're not hanging out there for people to speculate on what we can do, which would probably be unrealistic and financially, because you know, to some that the county might be the goose that laid the golden egg and think, well, let's see what we can get out of it. But right now, I think we're on a good path, and we should keep that path and be conservative because, as is said many times, we have future responsibilities, future liabilities, and we want to make sure we can meet those and look ahead 5, 10 years in the future.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioner? No. Okay. Great. Renee, I think this is was a terrific presentation, and I also appreciate your commenting on our financial policies and our financial position. I think what we've been working hard to do is to put the county in the strongest financial position so that it can deal with some challenges that are in front of us. Now, we haven't finalized the plans, and we're working on that now, particularly with the county complex. You know, we're working very hard on addressing a PFAS pollution problem so that we know we have some big bills ahead of us. But I do think your report is just further confirmation that we've positioned ourselves well in terms of meeting those challenges. Now what we have to do is to sort of figure out more details and spend more time sort of laying out a longer term plan. But we're I think your report is just confirmation that the way I look at it, it's confirmation that we're on the right direction. We're headed in the right direction, and we're managing our resources prudently on behalf of the taxpayers and the people of Barnstable County. So it's always nice when you get a very strong, very positive report from the auditors. No significant findings. That's always the first thing that I look for when I hear from the auditors. Are there any material significant findings? And once again, this is another year where we're in strong shape on that score. The other thing that I think is also important, and one of the reasons why we do this publicly is I think, and have this public presentation, it's to promote transparency in terms of how we manage the county's finances. You know, we don't have to have, I mean, we should have, in the interest of transparency, it's important to have this kind of discussion so that the public can hear directly from the auditors, and other interested officials can hear directly from the auditors what they think, you know, what they think of our financial statements and financial reports. I appreciate the fact that in your initial slides in the presentation, you talk about reviewing procurement, and monitoring of grant recipients, subrecipients, the way we go about staying on top of making sure the subrecipients manage their dollars in accordance with the requirements that we're obligated to follow. You know, I don't think we talk enough about that, but I think for folks watching this presentation, I think it's important to get across the point that particularly with the grant funds, we go through significant scrutiny, and we undertake significant scrutiny. And we sometimes will be criticized for the level of scrutiny, or let's put it this way, we often get complaints from recipients for the level of scrutiny that we apply. But we think it's incredibly important that we make sure that we do follow and adhere to the federal grant requirements and the other grant requirements that we're obligated to work under, and we follow procurement policies that the Commonwealth has established, and we safeguard these resources and manage them with a great deal of care. And I think that's another sort of aspect of an audit like this that comes out and becomes pretty evident to the public. You know, we live in an age where you know, a lot of people are cynical. It's easy to get cynical if you follow social media. But every now and then you need to have an outside auditor come in and basically take a hard look at what you're doing and give an honest and straightforward assessment as to how the county's finances are being managed. And that's what you've provided. And it also reaffirms the confidence that we have in our county administrator and the confidence that we have in our financial team, which is led by Carol Coppola. Carol and her team do an outstanding job of managing the county finances. They provide great advice and counsel to us as to commissioners, because we've made it very, very clear for quite a while that we want to meet the highest standards. We want to follow the best practices. We want Barnstable County to be sort of on the cutting edge and the flagship county government in Massachusetts. We're often called the flagship county government in Massachusetts, and that takes a great deal of work and effort. So, like I said, this is sort of the report card. That's the way I look at it. It's a report card on how we're doing, and our financial team clearly they get all A's, and it's nice hearing that publicly, quite frankly. And I know, as you said, Renee, doing an audit can sometimes be excruciating, and it's always nice when it ends. But really, the most enjoyment that I get is when you get the report and you get the statements and you get a presentation like this. So I appreciate you being here today. I appreciate it all every time you come before us and give us the straight scoop on our county finances. And you do a great job for us, and we appreciate all your service to Barnstable County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So unless there are any more questions, Carol, Michael, anything else we need to highlight or talk about? No?
We'll see the auditors in a few weeks.
Okay. Susan, is there anything you would like to ask? No? Okay, great. Listen, once again, Renee and Romina, thank you so much for all your work, and I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Okay,
A very big thank you to Carol Capola and her team
all
for
right.
that up.
Very good. So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is 6D, and this is the reauthorization of the annual delegation of certain duties to the county administrator. You have before you an updated version of the annual delegation. I'm going to ask if I can have a motion.
Yes, I move to, let's see, where are we,
6D.
E,
D.
I think it's E.
No, I'm on 6D.
Gee. I move to authorize the reauthorization of the annual delegation of certain duties to the county administrator as outlined in the July 8th, 2026 memo.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let me ask, I see. I have a PDF version of the agenda that is different from the one that is in front of me right now. So things have been reorganized.
We do that
Yeah.
just to confuse you.
Yeah, thanks. So, no, the administrator is right. And so we are with respect to the revised agenda on item E. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. All those in favor, Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Ford votes aye. It carries unanimously. We're going to move on to item F in our revised agenda.
Okay.
What did Commissioner Lyons say?
D.
I
Oh,
Or E.
I thought we were
yeah,
moving.
we're on revised.
I hear what you're
Does
saying.
everybody have the correct agenda? I mean,
Well, we have, it's following along. It's just the lettering is,
We missed a letter. Somebody skipped one. So we have.
well, we
We're
just,
next. The next item.
yeah, the
The
next
next
item F. Well,
the,
yeah, do I have a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2026-15, authorizing the rescission of a portion of borrowing authority authorization previously approved under ordinance 2024-01 for the Cooperative Extension AmeriCorps Vehicle Replacement Project in the amount of $6,634.25.
second.
So we've got a second on that?
Lyons.
Okay, second. So, any discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Forrest votes aye. Next item on our agenda is G, ordinance 2026-16. Do I have a motion?
I move to authorize, excuse me, I move to approve ordinance 2026-16, authorizing the rescission of borrowing authorization previously approved under ordinance 22-09 for the Cape Cod Commission Capital Building Project associated with the purchase and renovation of office and meeting space in the amount of $4 million, and would further authorize the project to instead be funded through the use of restricted balances within the Cape Cod Environmental Protection Fund in the same amount of $4 million.
Lyons seconds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
and Commissioner Forrest votes aye as well. It passes unanimously. Item H regarding the authorizing the Dredge Enterprise Fund. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve ordinance 2026-17, authorizing the Dredge Enterprise Fund Capital Program to rescind borrowing authorization previously approved under ordinance 2025-01 in the amount of $150,000 for the replacement of a CAT engine on a booster station, and to authorize the repurposing of remaining authorized, unissued, and/or unexpended bond proceeds in the amount of $76,613.01 for the CAT engine capital project for the Dredge Enterprise Fund.
Lyons seconds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote. Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye as well. It carries unanimously. We're on to item I, ordinance 2026-18. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve ordinance 2026-18, authorize general fund budget transfers totaling $81,500 for the purpose of funding information technology salaries of $1,500 and laboratory supplies of $80,000.
Lyons seconds.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to call for a vote. Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye as well. It carries unanimously. The next item J, ordinance 2026-19, creating an emergency management department. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we've discussed this in the past and given the administration authority to create such a department. So I move to approve ordinance 2026-19, creating an emergency management department.
Lyons seconds.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call for a vote. Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye. It passes unanimously. Item number K, proposed resolution 2026-06, supporting the voters' approval for an audit of the state legislature. Do I have a motion?
So moved. I don't have the thing in front of me.
Lyons seconds.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I talked to one of the sponsors of this ordinance, and his feeling was that his constituents felt that they had voted in a positively to create such an authority for the auditor to audit the legislature, and simply they were reflecting the views of their constituents.
Okay, is there any other discussion, Commissioner Lyons?
No, I do think that that's the sentiment of the voters in the majority. There's a majority sentiment there. I'm not sure if I'm part of it, but I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to support the approval of an audit for the state legislature. Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
and Commissioner Forrest votes aye as well. New business, do we have any new business that we need to bring up at this time?
No.
Hearing none, I'm going to move on to the Commissioner's consent agenda, item number 8. And we have a multitude of items, bid awards, contract amendments, discharges, all posted on our agenda. Commissioner Bergstrom, would you like to make a motion or Commissioner?
I move to approve the commissioner's consent agenda items 8, Roman numeral 1 through 8, Roman numeral 5, including all subsections as listed on the July 8th, 2026 meeting agenda.
Lion
Yeah.
seconds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Commissioner Lyon,
Lions votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye. Commissioner Bergstrom.
Bergstrom votes aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. The next item 9 on our agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes for June 29th. Do I have a motion?
Yes, go ahead.
I move to approve the June 29th, 2026 regular meeting minutes as drafted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Roll call vote. Commissioner Lyons.
Lions votes aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom.
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye as well. It passes unanimously. Item number 10 on our agenda, Commissioner reports. Commissioner Lyons, do you have a report for us today?
I do not.
Okay, Commissioner Bergstrom.
Nope, I do not.
Okay, we'll move along to number 11, upcoming business. And let's take a quick look at our schedule.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the schedule for your next meeting is actually Thursday, July 30th in Harwich. We adjusted your normal Wednesday meeting, pushed it off a day to Thursday, so it's Thursday, July 30th in Harwich. Excuse me, in Harwich. As the chair mentioned, we may be reviewing the AmeriCorps projects, which we didn't get to today, but specifically Harwich projects that AmeriCorps has worked on. We'll have some new staff introductions. We'll also have an update on the Cape Cod License Plate Fund and the kickoff for the new round of funding opportunities there. And between now and then, I'm sure we'll have a number of other items that get added to the agenda. That's what we have right now, though.
That's great.
Can I ask a question?
Sheila, go ahead.
Where are we going to meet in Harwich? Are we at Town Hall or the community center or?
I believe we're at Town Hall, but obviously we'll confirm that and advertise that.
Yeah.
Right.
Most likely in the Don B. Griffin, otherwise referred to as Bucky Griffin conference room. Yes, I work with Bucky Griffin. He was the leader of the independence movement on Cape Cod when I was on the Harwich Select Board. He actually even helped put together a flag. So
I don't think you were on the Harwich Select Board.
I used to work for the Harwich Select Board. Oh yeah, that's where I started. I worked by the I worked next to the vault in the basement of Town Hall. All right. Any other comments or questions, Sheila?
No, thank you.
No, Commissioner Bergstrom?
Nope, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun being in Harwich. One of the things as we go on to a commissioner, a sort of an item, I want to mention this to Michael because at last night's Yarmouth Select Board meeting, we invited the Cape Cod Commission rep to come in to update the Select Board. And he actually brought a handout of materials that were prepared by staff at the Cape Cod Commission. And I thought the packet of information was very, very thorough, very interesting, provided background on the amount of open space and a host of other characteristics of the town. It was a very, very, I think, a display of some of the data collected by the Cape Cod Commission that is clearly of interest and of use to the towns. And Dennis brought this in. Sarah Colvin was there. She handed it out to the Select Board. It was great. I think when we go to Harwich, we should ask Christy and the staff to maybe prepare something like that for Harwich, because I think we're asking the commission to come in to give us an update on the license plate funds, and they're going to update us on the next round of funding and some of the priorities of funding. I do think that in Harwich, if Christy and staff will be there now, we need to make sure that that date works for them. I think it will, but we need to just double check with her. Then I think it might be helpful to bring in a packet of some of that information because I thought it went over very well with the Select Board.
Good.
That handout. And obviously, we have a very good rep in the town of Yarmouth serving on the commission. So are there any county administrator staff reports?
We have a very lengthy report. No, we don't. I just want to let you know. I just want to let you know that the shared regional housing program for 2027 is up and going, and we've had obviously good response. Harwich, as I had mentioned, has joined, which is great, and so we'll be carrying on with that program for the next fiscal year and the fiscal year after, very likely. Had an opportunity to get out and visit the Dredge in one of its last days in Harwich, and saw firsthand the critical service they provide, as evidenced by fishing boat getting stranded up on a sandbar. Thank you. And then last, I want to tell you that we are working internally on another change order for GZA, our contractor that's working on PFAS issues, and that will be coming to you fairly shortly. But I just want to let you know we're working on that.
That's great.
Happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Michael, Sheila? Ron?
No.
No, okay. The only other thing that I just wanted to add a footnote in terms of Michael's report is that he and I have been regularly talking to our state representatives, making sure that there are amendments being worked into a couple of pieces of legislation to provide funding for dredging throughout the Commonwealth, and including our Cape community, and funding for Representative Luddy wants to do a study on long-term dredging needs. And there are others that think it might be also helpful to analyze the economics of our ports, because we generate a lot of economic activity, and that's information that could be helpful in a variety of purposes. So there's a study measure that has been, both of these measures have been adopted in the Mass Ready Act bill that was through the House, and now there's discussion, and it may have already happened. I'll be getting an update later today of amending the House Economic Development Bill that is working its way through to include similar language for dredging and a county study on the economic value activity in our ports. So just an update on that. Michael, we've been sort of tag teaming on that. So that's moving forward. So anything else?
That is it for now.
Okay. Then I have one final item on the agenda. Do we have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
All right. Was that a second, Sheila?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Let's go right to a vote. All those in favor, Commissioner Lyons,
Lyons votes aye.
Bergstrom,
Commissioner Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye, and that was unanimous. And we are now adjourned at roughly what, 1:30?
1:30.
Thank